Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order, and if we could please have a roll call.
Yes. Trustee Giroux,
Here.
Trustee St. Germain,
Here.
Trustee Herbst,
Here.
Trustee Pomponio, Trustee Robinson.
I'm going to do that again into my microphone. Here.
And Trustee Robinson.
I haven't heard anything else. Jessica,
Yes.
I didn't hear the last of the roll call.
Just Trustee Robinson.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, if we could do a flag salute, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sure, I can feed us and then I just say the pledge. It's always you.
Yeah. All right, so what's the open meeting law statement?
That was one that we were going to do for. Somebody did an email, Chris, I believe, about the email back to Idaho.
Madam Chair, I sent an email to the entire board, which is against the open meeting law rules, so I apologize. I won't-
Apology.
I've learned.
Gladly accepted.
I won't do that again.
That often happens with new board members. No worries. Okay. I was trying to remember what it was even about. We're supposed to say something about what it's about. It was
What the
simple.
issue was about?
What the
Yeah, our
email was about.
relationship with the prosecuting attorney's office
Oh,
in
that's right.
regard to
Truancies.
not the truancies, the expulsion
Oh, yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Perfect.
That way the
Thanks.
public knows exactly what we were emailing about. And then if we could have a motion to approve the agenda.
We approve the agenda. I move that we approve the agenda. Oh, I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
So let's go ahead and do our work session.
Okay, so we're gonna start our work session for the next 45 minutes or so, and then at around 6:30, we will move into our regular board meeting. Okay, I'll turn it over to Dr. Garrett.
Okay, thanks. So Jessica, I think was going to, if you guys would just go ahead and state your main name so Jessica can get us on record real quick. Everybody that's here, other than board members, obviously. Chew and Chips Bickertharian. Who's next? Are you getting these, Jessica? Can you hear them?
I can hear him.
Okay.
Mindy Paul. Denise Pomponio.
Perfect. Thank you. And Mike Garrett, sorry. So what I wanted to do tonight, I guess we talked about doing a little bit of a work session and getting everybody together. And so kind of the agenda for this is doing a little bit of a review for each of the buildings and departments, just a real quick summary of what they've done this year and some of the challenges they've had. I don't want to keep that very long because I want to focus more on the goals and where we're headed. And we've done a lot of work in the last several leadership meetings, and I have a sheet, and I believe, do I share this with you as well, the goal setting? If not, I will. So we can pull this up and take a look at it. Each department and each building is setting their own goals. We've also come up with some district-wide ones, and obviously you guys have input on that as well, but we want to do some as a group to kind of help show where we're at and what we're looking for. So that's really what tonight's about, is looking more about where we're headed and what we can do to help each other out with that. So any of you guys want to start, take the microphone and just give me a real quick summary of what you did this year and some of the challenges you faced. And obviously we all know that COVID was a challenge, but that created some very new challenges as well. So you can start wherever you'd like. So grab him a microphone. Yeah, we have to. You're a YouTube star tonight, so.
Oh, great. So IDYCA, like every place else, had some challenges. The fall class, we ended up sending home November 13th rather than December 15th. So that was a challenge. We were able to get them all their credits, however. We were able to do our pre and post testing. Obviously, with with more than 50% of our student body in quarantine, that testing environment was not ideal, so that the results were not as favorable as I'd like. Then the 21 TAC 1 class this spring, we started 2 weeks late, so it was a 20-week session rather than a 22-week session. We had some stumbling a little bit with the post-testing. Again, not everybody grew like they should. Interestingly enough, a young lady that had the second highest pretest score gained about 30 times more than anybody else. So the comment that I scored high the first time, there wasn't any room for growth, is now dispelled. There can be growth if they take the testing seriously. I think we've tested kids so much that it's hard to get them to take testing seriously. It really is. They're tested and tested and tested and retested. And we definitely noticed a great deal of apathy that we haven't seen before. And I this is just anecdotal, but I attribute it to last spring, everybody getting to go home and they pretty much just got a pass. Without, not necessarily everyone did all the work, but they got a pass. And at least our population felt like they were going to get that again. Though we did end up with 1,510 of the 1,512 credits available were earned. So the big push at the end, I really want to hold up my teachers. They really got after it, got it done. And I'm going to let Becca talk about goals for next year because they're not mine.
Yeah. So Beck, if you want to wait on some goals on this, and we'll go ahead and do some summaries first. Sorry. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. Whoever wants to go
I'll do
next.
a real quick summary.
Perfect.
So in special ed, one barrier we had was when the government shut down preschool at Head Start, and they said, get out. Like we had no building, no space, no nothing. So it was kind of challenging, but we managed to get all our kids in here and redo services and transportation and food and the whole 9 yards. And we made it work for many, many, many months. And the other challenge was our very high risk kids that couldn't come to school even if we were open, to providing services to them. But we did it. There we go.
I'll go next. So I listed a little bit of a summary on the year in my board report, but of course, most of our major challenges came from dealing with COVID and many staff members out at one time and trying to figure out how we were going to keep programs running. And then in the spring, when we started to see a little bit of normalcy, finding the time to get back into some of the normal things we need to get done in the springtime. But it was interesting to hear Bicker talk about possibly a little bit of apathy on the part of the students when we began to return to normal, because we feel like we experienced that here too. We had a lot more resistance to the normal things like testing and those types of things than what we've seen in the past. So some of those interesting challenges. Space for us remains a challenge. I know Dr. Garrett has shared that with you all. Mindy's going to be bringing the preschool into the building, which is great. We're super excited about the potential for that, but we are running out of space here. So when we brought the preschool in, when they shut them down before, we found a spot for them, which couldn't be permanent, but it kind of got the wheels turning, and now finding room for everybody is going to be one of our biggest hurdles.
So we have no home.
Well, she has a home. It's just not what we'd like it to be. So
Again,
Kind of like living with your in-laws or something.
maybe so. Only if your in-laws stick you in a closet when you visit.
Transportation had significant challenges. The fall prior to COVID, we lost one driver into the school year. We lost 3 more once COVID got here. Then we had a couple of retirees at the end of the year. Then into last fall, we lost yet another driver. Managed to hire on a couple along the way and lose them to other jobs. So in short, I had to assume driving morning and afternoons, 2 different routes, one route in the morning, separate in the afternoon. I had mobilized the technician out of the shop to drive to get along. We relied pretty heavily on sports doing self-transport, probably, I'd say at times, at least half the time. We put on one fella this spring, only to lose him to the prison. So I'd say it's
To work.
You got arrested?
he got a maintenance position, yes. Well, not a resident. And of course, with the COVID thing, the sanitation on the building and the buses was just the process of getting through the buses is quite an undertaking. We lost our inmate labor help at the COVID time. We're one of the only buildings that has no janitorial staff, so we kind of rely on the inmate labor to help us out with that. And so that was another duty that fell on all of us down there, which there's only 3 of us that work regularly there, and the bus drivers, they come and go in the day, and many of those have middle of the day jobs. So it landed pretty heavily for Tracy and I and Jason the mechanic to pick up the slack. Taking Jason and I out of the building for routes leaves a kind of a dangerous thing, because if we have a breakdown or something happens on the bus, that doesn't leave anybody to respond to whatever's going on out on the route. So we're kind of operating without a net. So that's kind of the challenges we had. We did we're able to consolidate 2 routes together. That gave us a little bit of just a slim cushion that we needed just to get by. But I don't know. Driver staffing is a major issue right now.
For the child nutrition department, we had, of course, some challenges as well. Some of the major challenges was due to COVID. We had a drop in our enrollment, which means a drop in participation. So therefore, budget-wise was not good. We lost a lot of our contracting that we do to bring in, like our catering stuff, our contract with Head Start. When they were out, of course, they did not purchase meals, so therefore we lost that revenue. We lost like the firemen's when they do them at the high school and those catering events, we lost those as well. So that was a huge impact we didn't have any control over. With the USDA making meals free since last March, parents didn't feel the need to fill out lunch applications this year. So our numbers have tanked when you look on the paper, but it really didn't matter to them because they were getting free meals anyway. So they're pushing for free meals again next year, all the next school year. So I don't see anybody really wanting to fill out a lunch application. Just got back from a conference and we were instructed not to worry about it. It's not our problem to deal with lunch applications for the district to use in grants and stuff. I think they're going to instruct IT and those for your E-rates to use maybe the census data. I'm not sure. They said they should be giving you guys information on what to do because a lot of schools won't be getting applications. So they're saying if I collect one lunch application, we have to go through the whole verification process and all the reports, even if one person submits one. If you don't submit any, and then that eliminates work on the back end that we have to do. So it doesn't matter if they put one in or they don't put one in, they all eat for free through next school year. So we'll see those numbers will probably go down as well. We do have to have the applications available if somebody asks for them, but they're basically telling us not to push them because it's not going to make a difference. It just puts more paperwork on us for no reason, basically. So that will affect the district in other ways because a lot of people in the community as well depend on the school district to provide those numbers for them when they apply for grants. So they might need to start looking at the census because those numbers might actually start looking better than what we're going to have. So any other questions? I mean, we're going to hear, it's just like everyone has to give the doom and the gloom and the negative.
So-
It's like,
So you said you lost revenue. What kind of revenue, what percentages is that event, that that
Like our
outside
Our
revenue.
Head Start contract was like $40,000 and they were out most of the year. So we lost, probably 3/4 of that.
But USDA is providing the food that's going to them.
No, they contracted with us and they paid us so much per meal.
Okay,
So when they were not in class, we provided no meals, so the revenue wasn't there.
right.
Does
But
that make
if,
sense?
but if USDA is covering the cost of the food, then it's the revenue side is we're not spending that money to buy the food to feed them.
It's different. What we get money, USDA foods and stuff for the school district kids who are here, but Head Start is a contract. They're not our kids. They're a separate group of kids.
Oh, I
So
see.
they purchase the meals through the district.
Okay,
So we budgeted for, X amount of kids according to our contract, but then when we shut down, they weren't there.
okay.
Does that make better sense?
And I think just to clarify, so that meant we were preparing fewer meals as well. But we actually use a lot of those revenue funds to actually employ our staff for the nutrition services as well.
Right.
So that's where when our revenue goes down, it hurts because we use that also for paying kitchen staff, which didn't change.
So actually, I had retirees and stuff. We didn't fill positions. So next year I'm down 2 food service staff. And that's because we don't have the participation. So we didn't rehire those positions. So
Do you anticipate the participation next year?
I hope so.
So,
I think
and
it
by
depends.
participation, do you mean kids are bringing a sack lunch instead of eating their
Some
hot
do.
lunch?
Some do. And we don't know. I mean, right now, down the line doesn't look real great for like our breakfast in the classroom. This next year, we're good. But the following year, because our numbers are so low, we don't qualify for Provision 2 breakfast anymore. The only school this year that they renewed was Peck School. But next year, everybody's free breakfast, free lunch. But the year after, if we go back to normal, everybody will be charged breakfast. And so then they're not going to eat if they have to pay for breakfast and lunch. So then the numbers are really going to look bad. But we have another year to get through before we have to deal with that.
So an information campaign might be helpful.
So this is not unique to our district. It's nationwide. It's not just statewide, it's nationwide. The participation's way down everywhere. So overcoming that is not something, I mean, yeah, we can campaign all we want, but they're gonna have to make the choice to eat.
And
So-
some of the southern schools in the bigger, heavier populated area actually has been able to use it as their advantage because when we run what's called the SSO, the seamless summer option is what the government is allowing us to run now, which gives us a little higher reimbursement. Well, anybody from 1 to 18-year-olds is able to eat food. So if they come to the school, we could serve anybody, whether they're enrolled or not. But we're in a rural area and nobody's going to drive their kids in to the school to pick up that lunch. Where in the bigger cities we're seeing, like in Boise and stuff, they're seeing that blow up for them because everyone can walk to school. They have out front and they're actually serving more meals than normal in the higher populated areas. But that's just one of the things we like about our area, but it also ends up being a downfall in some ways. So.
Thanks, Carmen. Brian and Russell.
A lot of mine are similar to Denise. It was a very reactive year, is kind of how I would label it, in that it was very difficult to be proactive when you didn't know on any given day or any given night what you're going to be faced with. And so I think towards the end of the year, we were able to regain some footing and try to lay a plan for this upcoming year and get back to some of what you'd maybe consider normalcy. But we had some real highlights that came out of it. I was very impressed with our staff, everyone, and their willingness to step up and do whatever it took to keep the doors open. I think at our junior, senior high school, we only missed, we did online learning for 5 academic days, and that was back in September. And was September, early October, just September. And so that was a total. One of those was a 3-day span. The other one, I think, was a 2-day span, if I remember correct. And so with what we were experiencing, to only miss that much time. And then the other thing it allowed us to do and kind of forced our hand to do was the integration of technology, that where some staff were having more difficult time integrating that into their classroom. In prior years, it really forced that. And so I think that's a positive outcome of everything that happened, because now they're better equipped to access some of these resources, and they're continuing to use them even in face-to-face instruction. And we can continue to kind of sharpen that tool for specific staff members. And we were able to provide, that was really where our PD had to be, because we couldn't do group face-to-face PD or anything that was what you'd maybe consider to be a normal school building professional development. So that was a positive out of it. Going back to the staff, whatever it took, people would do anything in the building, as well as our students. And that was another real neat thing to see, is leaders, not only staff, but students stepping up. And when they saw a need, they would help, and they would pitch in. They'd ask, do I need to get here early to help with this or that or whatever it was? And not all kids, but there's definitely these groups of kids who shine during those times, and highlighting those kids, I think, was a neat thing to see. Another one that I think was very positive towards our teachers and staff is we had very low, what I would see is learning loss. There was some things that, that we noticed were missed in the spring. Math, I think, was one that we definitely saw recognizable in some core standards from the kids coming back from the spring. But I included in the board report our ISAT results, which aren't the end all be all to everything. But when you look at state averages, we exceed state average in ELA almost across the board. I think we're 2 percentage points off in 10th grade. And then math, we continue to grow. So from where we couldn't take the ISAT last year, but from previous years, with that being a district goal of that continued growth, we are seeing that growth. It's not where we want it to be yet by any means, but it's going from, I think when I first came to the district, I think it was even in the teens in some of it, 18 to 22%. And this year we're up in the 30s and continue to rise in that average score, which is one of the district goals. So, it felt like 3 years and it was exhausting, but we're here. And I think we've learned a lot from it. And we also learned what systems we really need to focus on and going into this next year and kind of what is important rather than doing a whole lot of things and maybe not doing them all really well. As a staff, we've talked about kind of, okay, what do we really need to target? What do we see were real deficiencies? Because in times of trauma, you tend to see those come out where your deficiencies are at in your building and what you do for kids. And so things like social emotional wellness, some of these things that we tend to try to work towards that we can often miss or we just deal with it when it comes to us. And so coming up with some more proactive strategies for that, as well as proactive strategies for our instruction. And some of the things that we found out we're capable of doing, I think I'm excited for next year. I really am. I think it's going to be a good year. I think we've got some neat things happening, but we continue to get blindsided too.
Every day.
Staff member just today before, half hour before I walked in, our CTE that we were so excited about hiring on that additional position, which everybody approved and we put a lot of work into, said they're not going to be able to take the position because of something else that came up. So that's tough. So those kind of things at this time of year are very difficult because your staff's gone. And so convening a team, building a master schedule, when people kind of have a general understanding what they think they're going to be teaching that next year, but all of a sudden you throw one stone and that has a ripple effect to everything. And so that's what those kind of things.
Par for the course.
Yeah. And I'd love to be able to have July and breathe, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case probably. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks. Russell, you're up.
Well, I think for me probably, and for technology, I think and listening to Brian here, it's kind of the same thing. It's like being able to adapt and change has been what the last 18 months have really been about. And for technology, one of the first things we came back and we were masked, one of the first needs was to be able for several of our teachers to be able to be amplified in the classroom. And so we came up with systems to do that wirelessly. Then when we had students who were remote and teachers who were in the classroom, the problem of being able to facilitate a Zoom or a hybrid classroom situation with that. So we went to Bluetooth headsets for our teachers and tablets to help with the Zoom sessions so that you could try to get that classroom experience back to a student who couldn't be in class. And in some cases, get that classroom experience back to a teacher that couldn't be in a classroom. And so there were a lot of adaptations that we did there, and we developed some really nifty tools that I think we'll use on into the future in the classroom because of that. I agree with Brian. It really pushed us off the ledge, so to speak, for a lot of technologies to really identify technologies that can be helpful to us in the classroom, even in our normal day-to-day operations, tools that haven't been, I wouldn't say they haven't been widely used, they haven't been uniformly used across our staff. And this has pushed that and pushed the collaborative effort from those who had used those tools prior, and because it was universally needed now. And so that really brought a lot of our staff up to a more uniform level. So I think there's less diversity technologically in our staff than what we had prior to COVID. So those would be some of the good things. Some of the things that have been really challenging is with devices going home. We had, for instance, our high schools were set up to charge in the lockers. And of course, right at the beginning of the year, we had everything placed and ready to go with that. That all had to come out. It kind of went home. We're still kind of trying to figure out what's come back, but fortunately, most of it is back. We're in pretty good shape from what we can see at this point. There will be a little bit of replacement that we need to do, but we're in pretty good shape. And if folks hear this, it's like, if you still have a Chromebook laying around at home, get it back. We need them. You're going to need them next year. So, but we're looking pretty good across the district for that. We were able to get the new devices that we needed, maybe not exactly what we wanted, but we were able to find the devices that we needed. And so we were in pretty good shape that way. One of the things that struck me, because I work in this district and I've become so accustomed to what we use as technology, is when everybody went out back in the spring of 2020, went out of school, it became apparent that about 50% of the school kids in Idaho didn't have what our kids have, which was, we were 1-to-1 from grade 1 to grade 12 when we went out. The only students that we really had to add in was kindergarten, and we were able to facilitate that with devices that we were able to purchase and put in this year. So this last year, we have been 1-to-1 from kindergarten through 12th. And it was really a pretty minor adjustment for us as compared to a school. Many school districts were nowhere close to 1-to-1. And so they had a huge hurdle just to get devices for students to be able to use. The other thing that became apparent was connections at home. Even if there were connections at home, those were strained when we moved all of our students out of the building. We've spent years building good networks so that our buildings are well served. Our communities aren't so well served. And because of the area that we live in, that's not easy to do. But because of grants that came through, we serve a large portion of our population now that we didn't serve a year ago. There have connections available at home, and there's still some opportunities for maybe improving some of those also. So it's been really, though a very difficult year, I would agree with Brian. It's like, I feel like our whole technology team could really use a break, and there's probably not much of a break for this year. So we keep thinking, well, next year, but I don't know. But it is exciting to see how much we've grown because of the foe that we had. Quite literally, all hands on deck, and everybody came together, and we did well, in my opinion.
Thanks, Russell. So I'll add in my 2 cents, I guess, and listen to all them talk. I mean, I helped shoulder a lot of those things as well. And I was just kind of getting, my gosh, it's pretty heavy thinking about everything we did this last year and a half. But with them, I mean, they had to adapt every single day, and you guys had to do the same thing. I mean, I have to kind of play that middle of, what you guys need to realize, and you do realize, is every decision that's made in a boardroom has to be implemented out there. And I think you guys did a good job of balancing that. It was difficult, it was challenging, but it was reasonable. And I think we did a really good job of implementing and all of our, leadership interpreting and trying to make that happen. So that balancing act of what the community needs, our wants, what we need, what we want, what you guys are deciding to do it is a balancing act. So it was a year of challenges for sure. But I've said that in my leadership meetings as well, is we've grown way more than we realize just because of those challenges. So we have been pushed to limits that we never thought we would go to. And I think that's great. And we're going to take that strength and continue to move forward. So that kind of leads into my little segue into our goal setting. So we started back, I don't even know when we started goal setting. They're tired of hearing. Yeah. They're tired of hearing about it. And it got pushed. Go ahead.
Is Timberline not here?
Yes. Jason is broke down somewhere around council.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
he apologized. So we started this goal setting with as a leadership team, and we started talking a lot about this 2 years ago when we did start our accreditation process, and that got pushed back, became less meaningful to people. We brought it back up to the surface. I'm not sure we ever got it back up to the intensity that we had prior, but there was a lot of information we used, a lot of data that was out there. A lot of people did a lot of work, and those results I've shared with you. We've talked about those a little bit. We utilized those plus our what are they called? Stakeholder input, the interest surveys. The surveys that we do with our students and our staff and with our parents. So we pulled all that, and I challenged them basically to take that information and pull out those areas that are very common. We look at those as a district-wide goals because we have the data behind it to support it. And then I also challenge them to look at their own departments or their own buildings and what are they wanting to look at and work on next year. So those were things that came up. I did share that document with you guys in an email, and I'll pull that up so we have that. It is. And this is what I want to be very clear of. These are living documents. This is a document I told them as they modify, as they collect more data and information from their staffs, as they have ideas and those type of things. This is a document that will continue to grow, but it was a really good starting point. So I did every department, and we'll just kind of go through these real quick, and you guys can look at these on your own, but I just kind of want to give you an idea of what they came up with. But let me back up a little bit. I want to look at the district side first, and then we'll go into the individuals. So the district side of things, we just brainstormed about some of those things that came up from the surveys and from our accreditation. And this is what we came up with. Database decision-making, intentional focus, resources with a PD plan, facilities maintenance plan, emotional disengagement PD, marketing, and then celebrations. And we came up and just kind of combined a few of those. We talked about these last week. And honestly, they were all in zombie land last week. We just were out of school and they were all kind of in their own world. So didn't get a lot of responses, but I know their hearts were there. I don't know if their minds were, but I think their intentions were good. So looking at a few of these, and these are loose, and we want to talk to you guys about that a little bit as well. And then we want to refine these. So providing focused district-wide professional development to improve emotional support of students. PD would be relative to all employees. And when I say that, I'm talking about bus drivers, custodians, teachers, principals. Everybody is going to be involved in that type of professional development because they do impact the kids, and they need to know how to react to the kids and how to move forward with kids and get them in the right place. So trauma, communications, growth mindset, those are all ideas that were kind of fall within that. We're looking at, doing some kind of a leadership retreat. We had that on there as just some notes. And every person matters. That was something that, we have kind of in our motto, or we've had it in some of our descriptions, that every student matters, but we really kind of came down to every single person matters. It doesn't matter if they're an employee or a student or a parent or whoever it might be. And I thought that was a really good addition, and I'll give Russell some of the kudos for that. He side noted me and said, it's not just every student, it's every person. And I agree with that. And I think we live that. I just don't think we say it. And I don't think we realize that's what we're doing with each other as well. So Another piece of it was continuously market all the support, all JSD 171 programs in a positive manner. We spent a lot of time in our original part here. We were talking about the challenges, but I didn't ever really hear anybody talking about real negativity. They were all overcoming those challenges. And that's what we want to look at, is those are challenges we can overcome. And I think that we do a good job of supporting each other, but I think we can do a better job of that. I think that last year we were forced to be thrown into our own silos and work into your own, and don't get too close to somebody, and don't do, we were forced out of our collaborative atmosphere and our environment that we always work in. So bringing that back together, I think we're doing a good job of that. And I think we're getting there real quickly. So maintain 100% employee attendance rate for all scheduled professional development days. We tend to go through those Fridays that there's PD days. Teachers sometimes or employees feel like that's the time they need to be scheduling their kids' events or, doctor's appointment, whatever it might be. But we need to send the message that professional development is just as important as being there teaching or being there and, doing your job. So I think getting that word out there and supporting that is pretty important. And then on down to the bottom, we were looking at going through the process of revisiting our mission, vision, and motto statements. And then I had a few other things that those are kind of my notes that I've had over time, that these must do's. Our evaluations, we've already talked a little bit about the consistency. I've talked to the principals next year. They're going to go and share and do some walk through side-by-side evaluations at another school. They're not going to actually do the teacher evaluation at the end, but they're going to compare notes of what they saw so we can kind of recalibrate and have everybody in the same place. Every student, every person matters. We want to promote positivity and debunk misinformation. Of course, safety is always there. And then eligibility is consistent from high school to high school. That's a challenge for me. And I think it's a challenge for all of us at a district level, that if they're doing a little bit different in one school than they are in another, it's really hard for me to justify that. Well, why my kid not get to play when they make this grade? And here my kid gets to play when they make, so we want to have that consistency, make that a district wide. And we're really close to that. There's just a little bit more work that needs to be done on it. We've gotten closer over time. So, and those schools are unique in how they do that. So those are just a few of the things that we went through district wide and some of the things that came out of conversations. Thoughts, input from anybody? This is all wide open.
So those are the beginning of goal statements?
Yeah. And we don't have any measurable things there yet. Those are just some ideas that we pulled out of from some of the data.
And is the focus is around staff, the warm fuzzy side? I don't see anything concrete. I hear a lot of issues around space and facilities and this is all like really warm.
Yeah. Well, we want a warm space.
Yeah.
So we put it together.
So I understand that, but
yeah, one of the things that kept showing up on our data over and over, and if you look through some of the information I sent you, it shows that the kids were emotionally disconnected, and it shows, and all the research shows if they're emotionally disconnected, they're not going to do as well in school. What we came down to is we had a lot of personnel that were emotionally disconnected as well, from the strain, the stress, the change in schedules, the new learning, the PD, all this stuff together. So I think having those tools to deal with that is a really good solid baseline for building on top. And yeah, we have room for other goals, no doubt about it. This is just what we came from those surveys. Good question.
From the data, that emotionally disconnection was almost alarming.
Yeah.
And as they got older, they became even more and more disconnected, and it just glared in the data. We had to focus on that.
Right.
That's a big turnaround. But also, when we met with Dale, Dale Kleinert is the executive director.
Cognia, yeah.
Cognia. He said, we're not on an island. That happened everywhere in that COVID time, and everybody's having to deal with it, and you're seeing it a lot everywhere. Yep. But I think based on the data, we'd be remiss to not focus on that.
And that's the engagement survey?
Mm-hmm. And also the accreditation, the summary of the accreditation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I thought the engagement survey showed quite high rates of engagement. So
Cognia, yeah. So Cognia breaks it down. They had how they collected the data was a little different, and they broke it down this year. So we were one of two schools that were able to go through the training and see the actual assessment that they're going to put out next year. So we're actually a little bit ahead of the curve, and it broke down those disengagement. And as you look at that data from Cognia, it shows that, and I can't remember, I'd have to pull it up. I don't think I have it with me,
They were cognitively engaged.
Yes.
But not emotionally.
Correct.
Engaged. They're most
Correct.
emotionally disengaged.
And the
Yeah.
engagement survey shows the cognitive end of it, not as much the emotional engagement. If that clarifies, yeah. Thank you, Becker. Yeah.
But there will be focus like in our building on data, if that's what you're thinking is more of
Yeah.
a concrete data
Yeah.
type goals. And so like for us, what we want to do with our data, because we have the MAPS data as well as every teacher this year had to submit a growth. So in the fall, they have to do a individual growth plan and they have to determine what their data measure is going to be. So let's say that would be via a pre-assessment, the students score this. So then they would say, 80% of students will make 20 points growth based on the pre-assessment. And so some teachers use MAPS data. It depends. For us, it depends on the content area because some of them are content area specific. And so each teacher has to come up with a specific data point that shows their growth in that specific content area. And then we have to submit that percentage to the state, by June 30th. And so some of that for some teachers is ISAT, some of it's performance-based for the students, just based on what they're doing. And so for us, those are a little more individualized. For the district, if you look at the previous goals, there were math goals in there that we're working towards. And that's kind of what I was talking about, because that's utilizing the ISAT for those goals. And that's where we're seeing continued growth towards that goal. We have not met it yet, but I think was it 40%? Is that right? That we wanted to be at by?
I think it was 37 or something
37
like that. 37.
By, is it into next year? Or-
No, this one.
It was
Yeah.
this
We were
year.
doing an annual. Yeah.
Okay.
So
At
that'll be
eighth-
part
at
of
eighth
that
grade,
SIP
and the
review.
targeted 8th grade for that. Well, we were at 35.
Yeah.
And so, we didn't meet it, but we're getting
So
there. So
when
those
we-
kind of goals,
yeah.
those will still be there. For the individual teachers in the content area, that's a little bit different in the building. What I'm going to be doing with that data this next year is students are going to be forming their own individual goal sheets based on their own personalized data and areas. That's going to be one of our initial PDs. And so the students are helping track their own progress and their own data to maybe gain some ownership of that, because we've seen that when students are proud of it and everybody's talking about it, and it's something we can work towards student-driven conferences. It's something that the students are displaying this and understanding their data rather than being complacent about it and just being like, it's just another thing that doesn't matter. It's like, no, this is part of my portfolio that I'm going to share. And so that's how we're utilizing the data that we gather.
So part of that will happen whenever we do our SIP plan, our continuous improvement plan. You guys will have as stakeholders in that. And we'll go through that, and those will probably be math related. I would assume we're going to continue some of those. We talked a little bit about some from our negotiations about adding some in there as well. So that's a really good piece of that. What I'd like to do is, if we have time, is to go through each one of these real quick and just kind of hit the highlights of their buildings. And so they can kind of feed that information to you and kind of digest that. And I know we'll have a regular meeting here coming up, but as we do our continuous improvement plan, those are pieces that are going to help play into that, help making that decision for district-wide goals. And I kind of started the opposite of what we usually do. Usually it's like, oh, we're going to set a goal up here and it's going to go down. But I think it needs to come from the ground up this year, so we can, and probably every year, so we can start working towards those goals. So, and that'll let you guys help know what their needs are in the buildings as well.
Well, you heard my data piece already, so I'll just go and
Yeah.
go through.
Yep,
a few.
real quick.
Just
Yep.
stop me or ask questions if you have anything on it. But these were developed with the staff. We did a Google form and tried to gain feedback on what the staff saw were some needs based on some of the questions answered or focused on. So social emotional wellness, we talked about that. Staff PD focused on trauma-informed teaching and growth mindset. Continuing with our sources of strength, student leadership, ASB, and character trait themed quarters will work collaboratively. Those have kind of been student leadership and ASB and source of strength. There have been pockets, and we want them student body council. So we want those to work collaboratively for more buy-in from all groups of students and have it be a little less segmented and pocketed. Increased cultural awareness, so representation of cultures through geography, history, and artifacts. Curriculum relevance. So we're going to do we're going to start with 2 cross-curricular units per quarter. And so let's say 4 different content areas, we'll formulate cross-curricular units based around the same theme to build relevance, and where the students are working through a different lens on a similar project or a similar concept, and to gain a deeper level of learning, but that's going to take time. So I said 2 weeks per quarter is a reasonable goal, but you have to put the time in to build those and actually calendar those. And we've done it in the past, but it was one of the things that was lost this year, because doing cross-curricular collaborative units when you can't be in the same room with somebody was kind of tough. So, but we didn't do as much. So I'm not going to talk about career technical because I don't know what that's doing now. We've got a lot of kids signed up for it, and we'll continue it obviously, and continue to do a good job, which we're doing. But as far as that extra position, spirit, increasing that unity school spirit in collaboration with the students. That's one area the students, when I talked to them, really wanted more of, felt like that was lost. And that's an important part of being at school, is having spirit and pride. And when you can't have assemblies and you can't do those kind of things, that takes a big dip. So we're going to really do that. I talked earlier about focus areas that we felt like we absolutely need to do well, and that's academic and behavioral response to intervention, which we've had practices in before, but we're going to really focus on that and use staff leadership for our response to intervention programs to make sure students aren't falling through the cracks, and that we're having good systems to support them. I'm trying to kind of go through it here. Dr. Gary talked about the calibration of the evaluative process. And then leadership delegation. One of the things I need to work on as a principal is making sure that I'm delegating leadership appropriately, but putting good parameters and guidelines around what that leadership looks like, so that there's some accountability there. So people aren't maybe just signing up to be on a committee just so they can check that box and say, I'm a leader, or I'm applying for a leadership stipend. Not that that happens all the time, but you do get people that carry the load. And I need to be able to, as a principal, delegate that, but also guided delegation of what that looks like, so that people have roles, and I want the staff to help build those roles and not have that just come top down from me of like, if you're on this team, this is what you do. It's like, let's all agree, if you're on this team, this is what you do. So people are accountable for their roles on leadership teams, and not just showing up and knowing that someone else is going to take all the work and not doing it. So that's it.
All right, thanks. Denise, you're up.
So the goals that we looked at for our school came from some staff input. And then Lindsay and myself worked on sort of getting them into writing, but really 2 major areas for us, which would be the emotional engagement of students and staff, and then improved academic outcomes as a result. So you can kind of see in the document that I submitted that there are some action steps there that we're proposing to help improve the emotional engagement. And we'll be looking at that evidence as improved attendance data for students and staff, and then student staff survey data in the spring. I will add numbers to that as soon as I have a chance to really break that down and set some reasonable goals for improvement. A couple of our major action items are just centered around reorienting ourselves to a focus on some of the things that we couldn't do this year because of COVID. We're sort of in our schools still in that what the heck just happened to us phase. And so we're gathering the data and we're looking at things and we're trying to analyze it and see what are areas that we can improve with action, and what are areas that are just a result of some of the fallout from COVID that might take some creative thinking or new programs to get around. So you'll see some reorientation goals there as far as maintaining the safe and supportive and collaborative culture. So implementing instructional rounds, time dedicated to collaboration through scheduling, mentors for new teachers. We want to continue to build that program. We have a relatively young staff right now. And we've had a bit of turnover with some retirements here. So we're kind of in that place where we're in a little bit of a rebuilding phase. So getting back to that. We want to continue to build our counseling program. We brought a brand new counselor in this year in September after the school year started. So he kind of had to hit the ground running and just be responsive to the needs of the students and didn't have a lot of time to be proactive with his program. So we're looking to partner him with a good, solid mentor and support him while he rebuilds the counseling program for us. One of the pieces of that is we would like to, of course, include character education, but we want to implement a benchmark screener for social emotional risk twice a year. So that'll give us a little bit of data about our program. It will help us identify students who are exhibiting externalizing or internalizing behaviors and build some programs around that, and then survey again in the spring to see what the effect of that intervention has been. One of the new things we're looking at for next year is some intentional work to build student agency. We're going to start this in the 6th grade, but we're going to be implementing a mentor assignment and a goal setting program. So every student in the 6th grade will be paired up with an invested adult who will meet with them on a regular basis on a schedule to help put them on the path toward goal setting and being more, developing more ownership for their education, hopefully prepare them for, some of what Brian has coming as far as tracking their own data and understanding their own progress and what their educational needs are. And then we want to add career awareness opportunities also to the 6th grade, where kids are just introduced to what careers are out there in this big world, and we can start doing some work on interest and aptitude with them to prepare them for more work that direction. Our academic goals are, again, just noted with some action steps there. So we want to continue to work to understand the data that we're collecting. We're struggling to find correlation between our MAP results and our ISAT results at OES. So we need to dig a little deeper there. We saw some grade levels that made really great progress in performance on the ISAT, but not so much in those same areas on MAP. We saw, interestingly enough, we saw really good growth on the MAP assessment through the fall, which was one of our most difficult times in regard to COVID. And then in the spring, we saw that drop way off when things were normalizing somewhat. So we're still working on trying to
We're figuring it out.
understand where that data is
yeah.
coming from and what it's telling us. So there again, just monitoring areas of academic need and building responsive interventions for students. We're still committed to math lesson study building wide, and I work pretty closely with Ryan Dent. He's making a big difference in the practice here in the building as far as math instruction, and that's really great to see. The levels of engagement for the students are increasing, and the levels of engagement for the teachers as far as feeling like they're good at teaching math is improving too. So that's helping. Some work to vertically align grade level priority standards. We need to do some work identifying any gaps in the standards, and then I establish ownership there. So if we determine there are standards that aren't being taught well, which grade level is going to own that so that we can make sure we're mapped all the way through and not leaving any gaps in instruction. And that's about where we're at. It's a lot.
Mindy, you want to go? We'll just go on across while we're here.
Well, I mean, our kids are in these buildings and everything.
Yeah.
I
What they
mean,
said.
really, and our staff too, but for us, so we have, it's really, really important that we have really, really good support for our high need kids. It's very, very hard to find people to work with our high need kids. So we're just looking at different ways that we can kind of attract and retain loyal, knowledgeable, I really want to do this job. How can we help them? And we've talked about quite a few different things, and we're moving in that direction. And then our other area of concern is when we ask questions, when we have questions, we're federal programs. We have rules and rules and rules. And so if I say, hey, Rebecca, what about this? And she says, oh, I think this, that's not good. Like if somebody asks you about a policy, any one of you, I'm sure you would say, well, I'm gonna have to look that up before I can answer that question. So what next year, what we really, really want to encourage is our special ed teachers to use all our resources. that are out there. You know, the state has resources set up. We have SESTA, the Idaho Training Clearinghouse. We have best practice binders. We have chat helps on our programs. So like, don't call Chris, just hit the chat and the guy will come on and answer your question. So I know it sounds really simple, but it's huge. So those are the two things that, and most of our professional development follows that right there. There you go.
Nice. Thank you. Rebecca.
All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Kaczynski. I'm the newly hired IYCA principal. And due to the nature of my transition and also just familiarizing myself with the academy itself, you'll see that this is fairly simplified. I'll get a chance to expand after I've been through a cycle and can kind of ground. I did get a chance to meet with the staff and chat with them about what they were hoping to accomplish with this kind of change. And they are hoping to be engaged more with the district. So I framed our goal around that we're going to work to increase engagement with the school district in the school year through dedicated attendance at all of the professional development opportunities and district days, as well as trying to utilize some of the resources that the district has available, whether that's network or special educational resources, making sure that, and also on the flip side, utilizing some of the resources the academy possesses to enhance things that the district has as well. There's some very powerful assets at the academy that I think could be beneficial to the district as a whole. A lot of that, again, is going to be exploratory for me here at the first part. Vicar and I are doing that transition together. I started full-time my first full day today. So I've been there on and off. Right. I've been on and off throughout finishing up the Timberline and making that transition. But I do think that talking with the staff and seeing that they have this desire to, they are district teachers. They want to be involved in all of the district opportunities. And again, like I said, I think just getting to know them briefly, understanding the resources they may be able to provide to the district as well as professionals. So while simplistic, I hope to, and I spoke with my staff about this, that once we finish the cycle, we'll sit down in January and maybe add a goal or two just based on more engagement stuff, our longevity of our program as far as its success. So different things along those lines, but this is where we're gonna start.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
You were disgracing your class. These meetings go to like 11:30.
I looked at the agenda, I'm like, yep.
No.
Mr. Ben, you're up.
It's true.
6 months.
I know where to find you.
Statute of limitations.
So majority of the goals that I have are pretty much just around our immediate challenges. Obviously, the top of the list is going to be staffing. And it's pretty imperative that we find a way to attract some drivers so we can have some resemblance of normalcy in the transportation program. And then the other one, of course, is on the safety side of things. Pretty much all of the buildings. Most of that is stuff that's been identified by the state transportation specialist that comes every other year. And over the course of time, they've identified our loading zone deficiencies. And of course, our building safety inspector brought up some of our reoccurring things at our home facility. So that's down at the bottom of the list. And obviously there's more things that we could have for goals, but I'd like to kind of work on what is probably the highest priority and build on after that once we're kind of accomplishing things.
So I met with Ben earlier today, and we're going to do a deep dive into some data around bus drivers, wage rates, benefits, schedules. I want to work with the Department of Labor to look at the characterization of these kind of part-time jobs and maybe a recruitment strategy around that. And so that's a plan. If anybody's interested in joining me for that adventure, we'll be gathering some data. And
so hard.
yeah, well, you know, I love data, right? I mean, data is a really cool way to make decisions. And so there may be some resources out there. Ben suggested that one of the other bus barns has done a wage and benefit analysis, and it's not just as simple as I said, oh, well, I can just call the regional economist and get all this. And it's like, well, but then there's this rate for this and this rate for that. And so it's more complex than just a salary. But one of the things that I've seen is other districts are having this issue because I'm seeing advertisements in the paper, come learn how to be a bus driver, there's a workshop, and so there's got to be a way that we can learn from each other and come up with a solid proposal of how to move forward with this. And the time is now. He shared with me that if we have to train someone with the CDL licenses, it's not just one, it's 6 weeks. And so this is our window. So, yeah, so stay tuned.
Have some hot buses like.
Make sure you document what you do so we can sell it to other school districts across the nation.
If you drive anywhere,
It's
almost every community has a school bus with a sign on.
Yeah.
is now hiring. Yep.
It's universal.
And it's not just school bus drivers, right?
Right.
Every cafe, every convenience store,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there an age limit for a school bus driver? Meaning
State first 21.
21. We were just talking about some of those new high school grads, maybe who don't have a job lined up yet. But if they're looking for 21-year-olds, that makes it harder.
Dr. Robinson, you've seen our seniors drive in our parking lot.
Yeah.
I
And you were at graduation, correct?
But we know them, so we would know who's the most responsible,
Uh-huh.
right?
I heard the gong on.
There's
several
gotta be a
of the
few
ones
out
across the stage. Yeah.
Just trying to think outside
Oh,
the box.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's what we need to do.
All
Carmen.
right, child nutrition, I keep it very simple. The main thing is we gotta market and let the parents know what's going on and what's available. I still come up against the old school lunch stereotype, mentality from back in the day. I don't think people realize how many options students have at school. So that's one thing, and marketing would be great. This next year, we're planning on flipping out the full salad bars for the junior high, senior high. When we do that, it'll also help relieve some of our staffing issues, limitations. The staff will be handing out like the main entrees, and the students will get to choose their own fruits and vegetables. We found out when they get to pick their own, they eat better. We can have corn on the line, but if you give it to them, but if they get to pick it themselves and put the same corn on their plate, they seem to enjoy that lots better. So we're going to put that back out there so they feel like they have the options. We do have, like, especially Orofino High School has more options than Timberline usually, but just for the amount of students in the buildings. So up here at Orofino High School, they do grab and go. So they have about 4 different options on entrees. So there should be something they like, not just with a published menu. So we're also going to look at Orofino Elementary this next year to offer a second entree, at least to those students who pass on the main entree. I'm a little shocked at how many I've seen pass on the main thing, like the hamburger or whatever. Then you're making them take fruits or veggies or giving them carrots or apples to make sure they have something on their tray. So we're going to try to have something, even if it's the Smucker's peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something, that they will have to eat so they're not going with, hungry. And maybe some of those kids that doesn't like what's on the menu that day knows that they have another option, so they'll still choose to eat because they know they can get another option other than what's menu. I don't know, we'll probably hit a lot of the higher kids first. I don't think kindergartners can handle taking options like that. So we have to be a little, I guess, smart on who we offer, how we go about that. Or lunch will go on forever at the elementary grades. So we'll continue our training. There's lots of training that is required from USDA for food service staff annually. Take the same thing every year. So, and then we also make sure that our staff here is level 1 certified through the School Nutrition Association, and those are ongoing classes that we do, as well as we're required to give civil rights training, the fruit and vegetable training, offer versus serve training to all staff in the district. So we try to hit that on the first in-service day and do a really quick overview of that. So we just have to make sure we have all of that done and documented. So that's our main goals.
Russell? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
There's no link in there.
I know.
Let's deal with that.
I was just curious myself what your goals were.
Yeah.
It's a personal question.
Well, when you come up with goals for IT, it's kind of, I'm not going to say difficult, but as I listen to what is going on across the district, our goals follow that. And our goal really hasn't changed since I've been in this position. And that's like assess what the needs are of the student and the staff and figure out the best way that we can meet that within the budgets that we have, or go find more money. So it's very much that same thing of being in a position that we can adequately support everything that needs to happen for students to learn the best. And if we see new systems that may facilitate that, to help staff come up to speed on those, to implement those, to pilot those. And so I don't really see anything new for us goal wise, but it's going to look different. It's going to, whether the devices change or whatever additional things we need. So I was just thinking, it's like, yes, this is on my to-do list because I don't know, we're going to try to do the same things we've been doing better, always. I have, my philosophy is there's always a better way to do it. Even if you've been doing something for a long time, take a look at the process and see how you can be better at it. And so I think it just flows the same way. And so for us, it's really important for the IT staff to be involved in the building and staff meetings at the building, and so that we know, so we have a finger on the pulse and know what's needed and what's lacking. Because I could walk into a building and nobody said anything, and I walk in and by the time I've walked 50 yards through the building, I have these needs. And it's like, well, we should be addressing those more proactively. So it's a matter of being out there and listening and knowing and being responsive. So.
And that's why you went last.
Oh,
So the FCC just announced $7 billion for an emergency broadband benefit around school and education. And Chairwoman Rosenthal has been hammering on the homework gap. And so it's for infrastructure, it's for devices, it's for service.
Yeah, the ECF it's a little tricky for us. So we've looked at that, and the application is through the E-rate process, or similar to the E-rate process. The challenge for us is you would have to, it's a good pot of money, but you have to identify the need, the specific solution, and then we would have to go out and apply for funding to do that. The solution would be owned by the school district to be implemented at home. So devices we already have covered because we're one-to-one K-12. So we've already got that in hand. So we can't really go out and do that necessarily. And the other piece is rather difficult. When this first started kind of coming together and what it looked like it was going to be, put out some feelers with local vendors to see what our options might be. Because depending on where a student lives, if you are talking about a home internet connection, it is very much based on geography. Where do they live and what's available there? And so we'll be trying to work through some of those things. The window opens June 29th. It's a 45-day window. So it's pretty short, and it's in a time when we've got a lot of other things going and we don't have parents involved. And that's very much has to be because we have to, those things that I mentioned. So it's going to be challenging to define that and be able to apply for it. Now they are planning to open a second window where you could reimburse. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if there's something that we can do to be beneficial. But it is difficult to get that one really well defined to apply for.
All right. So Mr. Hunter and then Amber is not here either for the nursing. They have some goals as well. You guys can take a look at those as you go through. And like I said, I shared this document with you, and all the links should be live and hot. You can see those anytime, and you can check back in. And we're going to check back in with them quarterly as well as a leadership team. So these will evolve as we go. And they're not set in stone, any of them, but I know they've done a lot of work with their staff and with a lot of the people trying to figure out, what directions we need to go, using a lot of data and So it's been a good process. I think we have a little bit more clear direction. I don't think we're really there because everybody's pretty fuzzy right now. So I think when we come back in August, I think that'll clarify a little bit, and we can put those pieces together. So I applaud them for going through that process. It was pretty painful because they were at the end of the school year and it was tough. It was a tough year. So I appreciate all of them doing that work and putting that effort in because it means a lot that we have something written down that we can focus on. And you guys need to keep that in mind. It's not written in stone. We can evolve. These are working documents. So continue to work on them. So you guys have other comments or questions, or this is a good time for that.
Just to make a comment that as we go into the new year and we're setting these goals, not only for Dr. Garrett, but also for the continuous improvement plan for the district, I kind of want to make sure that we use that now that we've had a full year of data, that we use that data to figure out where our needs are for our students, because that crosses over to curriculum, staffing, and so many different areas. And even if we need to broaden our categories of improvement and say, maybe we need a curriculum category because we need to work on something more than just math, we need to have that data to figure out where those weaknesses are so that we can work to improve not only resources for the students, but also to be able to reach their full potential. So I think we need to try and July will be a meeting where we'll start talking about our goals for next year, continuous improvement plan.
Yep.
And we need that interpretation of your data to help us figure out what those goals will be. So we can talk more about it later, but I just want to make sure that that's one of our focuses. That a lot of the focus certainly that you guys have is excellent, but when we're moving forward with our goals for next year, it also needs to be that curriculum focus as well.
Comments, questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done this year. It's been a tough year, and it's been a tough year for us on the board too, really. I mean, it was kind of a learning process for us, and you guys have been very patient with us too. And but you're always very informative, very helpful, and we want to help any way we can, just write down, even do anything we can do. We just want to let you know that we're here to support you. We appreciate what you're doing, and we know that we're going to continue to improve with people like you. So thank you.
Yeah. Well said. Thanks.
What he said.
Ditto. Yeah. Yeah. So we would like to do, we started with a schedule of more work sessions, a few years ago, and then we kind of got cut out of that. We'll try to get back in that routine so we can do that at least quarterly. So yeah, and I think it'll help improve, your guys' decision-making abilities just by having more data and more information and seeing the other side of things as well. But this year, everything just kind of we all know, turned the wrong side out, and we just made it through. So time to refocus. Yeah. We all definitely aged. It was just
Dr.
part of it.
Robinson, we do have the data. So I just don't know what format maybe you want to see it in, because I can just target the areas, and then like Dr. Garrett can pull it for the entire district if you're looking for like the district goals. But I have
District's probably gonna be what you want.
We do have, like, I can tell you the standards that we're weak in. It's a matter when you talk about resources, that's a tough one, because sometimes that's staffing resources, sometimes that's finding, like, doing a curriculum vetting process based on that. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Is like, okay, well, these are areas we're recognizing our weakness. What can we try to implement to fill that need? Is that
there's a lot of layers to it, and I appreciate that. And I know that you're already doing some of that work.
Yeah.
We just don't necessarily know what you're already doing.
Gotcha.
So that's where maybe even if it needs to be an executive session where you can speak more freely, because I understand that when you're talking about grade levels and you have teachers that are isolated to those grade levels, you can't speak openly. So I'll let you guys work that out with Dr. Garrett and figure out what's the best format to discuss those things, to know where are those weaknesses? What are you already doing? What do we need to do more? And what can we do to help you have those resources? Does it mean we need to invest more, either a new curriculum or more leadership towards a certain department? Those kind of things. I know that there's a lot that goes into that decision-making process, but I feel like that is a piece of what you're already probably doing that we don't see or know because of the care that we take to not make things too open. But I think it would be important for all of us to be in the loop in that.
Right.
Thank you.
So one other thing before we go on to our regular session, I gave you guys all a book. We started this book. It was just something to kind of get our goal minds back on and refocused as a team. I wouldn't mind running through this with you guys as well. I think it has some really good relationship on what you guys decisions you have to make versus, even what they have to make and what I have to make. So that we worked through the first chapter or so. I think what we do, get through a couple chapters of this. And I think overall people were pretty receptive on it, had some good input and some good conversations, but it really just talks about how to refocus and how you should develop goals, become a team first before you can ever develop those goals. And then you start developing those goals and then you advertise those goals over and over and over again and make sure everybody knows and then check back in. So it's a pretty simple read, pretty simple book. It's a pretty simple concept, but at that point in time, we all needed pretty simple. So it and I think it helped a little bit. I mean, you guys can speak to that if you thought it was crazy or good or whatever. It doesn't matter, I guess, but I felt like there was some good conversation and some focus on it. So we'll try to do that throughout next year. So we're kind of putting on a hiatus right now until August. We're going to pick it back up when we come back. So everybody's going to kind of take a break from that. So if you guys want to read the first couple chapters, we'll get caught up in August and then we can move forward from there. You can read the whole thing if you want. I don't care. Good. Questions? Am I missing anything? Looking at all you guys. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, I appreciate the more information you guys can give us, I think the better we can do to support your jobs,
Yep.
especially with having a board that's a lot of new players, potentially more new players in the future. And so that's where I think the more we can communicate is probably the better off.
You guys did it. You survived.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should we roll into our regular
Yeah. I
meeting?
think you're down to.
Feel free if you need to take a potty break.
Yeah. And as we go, there's some discussion items that you guys, if you don't mind sticking around for those that might involve you guys just a little bit, I'd like some of your input on them. And then after that, I mean, if you want to stick around or you want to go, that's up to you.
We
So.
can try and be pretty efficient because I
Yeah.
think most of what we would have discussed during the regular meeting, we had a
Right.
chance to discuss
Right.
beforehand.
Yep.
Okay. So we are on public input.
None.
None. Okay. And consent agenda. I did send an email to you this afternoon, but you may not have received it. I think there's a meeting that's missing from the day after Memorial Day.
Okay.
From the minutes.
Well, I was just getting ready to go back through those and get.
There's a
them, make
lot
sure
of
they were on our-
meetings.
Yeah.
A lot of meetings.
Get them back on our website. We haven't got that completely done yet. So.
Okay.
So do you know what the date?
I want to say it was June 1st or 2nd.
I don't know how that could have happened.
Hmm.
I think last I counted.
It was the one I missed.
7 or 8
Um,
meetings.
yeah, it would
in
have
the last
been,
12 months.
it would have been the 1st.
So
I missed it.
June 1st, May
I think
1st,
so.
June 1st.
June 1st. Because wasn't there one the day after Memorial Day?
I'll check. I'll just check.
Okay.
If it's missing, I will put it on there.
Okay. But as far as all the minutes of the meetings that are listed, and of course, we have payments of bills and financial reports. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I just wanted to comment, one of the minutes listed a Charity Richardson. Who
Oh,
called
did it?
Well,
We
maybe it
should've-
was.
I was wondering who that was.
We have a teacher.
We probably should
Is it
correct
under
that.
member?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Which one was it that you have it listed?
It's the April 19th.
April. Oh, one of the old ones. Okay. That was
Right.
one of the two I didn't open.
That's good. May not be able to speak.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Dr. Robinson. I'm sure it was my fault.
That's okay. So we'll just have you fix that.
Yeah.
You bet.
Any other typos?
I usually read through them too after she says them. She submits them to me and I missed it too. So, you know, and we do have Charity Richardson working for us. So
That's true. Mhm. Okay, so with the correction for the April 19th minutes, do we have a motion? Anybody? Okay.
I move we accept the consent agenda with the correction of the April 19th minutes.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda with the modifications of the April 19th minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Reports and recognitions. We already spent quite a bit of time talking about our building reports, program reports, and are there any other pieces?
Because the ISAT results that I put in the report are kind of hard. Because they were hard to read, I went ahead and made a packet for you so that you could just take these home.
Thank you.
Oh, that's great.
So just keep in mind the data on this, it needs to stay
So
with
in
you
the
guys and
first-
destroyed
the first
later.
couple
Yep,
pages is
confidential.
district-wide.
Yep.
But then I gave you the breakdown of every grade level of
Mhm.
the schools.
Right.
And so that needs to be only.
Okay, gotcha.
In particular
Yeah.
with our smaller
So
schools, it's
actually,
difficult to
after
do that.
you go through it, you read it, and you understand it, you should actually shred it if it's not.
Yep, please do.
But I know that first chart was kind of hard to read. And I also tried to on the district-wide, put the state number and then how close we were to the state.
Okay.
So you don't have to read them now, just.
Very
Thank you,
helpful.
Mindy.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I thought the graphs and the charts were.
And then the IRI, if you notice, when I did the IRI, I did the different levels, like strategic, what are the three? You know, when they score strategic or intensive, yeah, or benchmark. So what I did was I just took those levels where all the kids started out kindergarten, first, second. Third still, third. So I put those three levels and I just showed their growth across the board because I figured that was the best way to look at growth.
Mhm.
So, and that's on the actual report I turned over.
I think that data for my school's in my report as well.
You probably presented it. I did district wide.
Yes.
And I think just so that you guys kind of explaining the differences is that like with the elementary school, the IRI showed the growth. So it took the fall numbers and compared it to the spring numbers. With the rest of all of this, the reports, it was all compared to the state level.
Yes.
And so that is an important piece of information, but of course, we'll also be looking at some point at what is the growth, where is there lack of growth, those kind of things to address. And it sounds like there's some maps issues that you're still trying to figure out as well. So,
ISAT test last year, so that
correct.
data is somewhat skewed.
Mhm.
And the test was only half the test. When they took the test this year, it was cut in half. So instead of the kids on the ISATs, instead of them getting like 44 questions, they got like 22.
That's why I looked at I included state average on my board report.
Mhm.
Because I want to kind of compare across. So if you look at our scores versus other schools with similar demographics, which you can do, you can go on the state site and do that, or go on to idahoedtrends.com, and that'll give you can pull up any school and actually cross compare data for the ISAT on that.
Mhm.
We did, I feel like we did well. That's highlighted here. If you look at our proficient in advanced in seventh grade. 77% of our kids in ELA are proficient or advanced, where a state average is 58%.
Mhm.
And same with eighth grade, 69%, state average is 55.
Mhm.
I put those on the
Yeah.
report I gave them.
I saw
so they
that.
could
Yeah,
See exactly
yeah,
what the
yeah.
state did
Mhm.
and how close we were.
In math in 10th grade, we met state average, so that's that growth, but I think
Mhm.
we're close, you know, in these other ones here, so that's kind of what I
Mhm.
could use on that, because like, it might not be the same test it was given previous years, but it is the same test that every other kid in the state took. And so that's a way to kind of say, okay, how are we doing in comparison? And then you can also go on there and look at schools with similar demographics, or doing very, very well in comparison to those.
And even though we will never have last year's data to use to compare, we can for the cohorts, you go back 2 years and compare and see, how are they going across the years?
We can go back.
Yeah.
I can go back. I mean, if you wanted me to go back and look, I
And-
could do that.
And at some point that will be important because part of our goals for the superintendent and for the continuous improvement plan was like, we had math specific goals and we have to look at that cohort. We
So
can't
you want me
compare
to go
this
back
year's
2
seventh
years?
grade with the seventh grade from 2 years ago
That's right.
completely. We have to actually isolate it and look at the cohort as well and say, well, did the seventh grade from 2 years ago show progress? Or does that make sense? Or
Yeah.
the 10th grade? So
Make sure it's the same kid.
it has to be the
That-
same
that's what-
cohort.
that
Yep.
data is so difficult, and if they've changed the test, are we comparing apples or
Mhm.
not? So
Mhm.
we have to look at it in many ways and not
We
get
do,
too.
not just
aligned.
one piece of information. And certainly comparing ourselves to the state is a great way to look at it as a start. And even, of course, we want to outdo the state in every way that we can, if possible. That's our goals, right? But when we're looking at, well, where do we need to focus our resources and our attention and what do we need to change or work on? That needs to be looking at, is there always a deficiency after a certain grade level? Is there some issue there with our curriculum or with the teacher? Or is there a certain cohort that needs more resources, more attention to try and get them to where they need to be? Those kind of things. So,
Absolutely, I think
Yeah.
that's an important characteristic for y'all. I think the other thing to look at with that state data is this a trend?
Mhm.
So in seventh grade, do math scores traditionally go down across the state because standards have shifted, like Baker said, it's a different test, it's different, these kind of things, so
Mhm.
rather than. just
and
say,
they're
"Wow,
13.
How come 50% were, how come 50% were proficient in this grade, but now it's down to 35? Well,
Mhm.
if you look at that's the trend, and why is that? Now it's not an excuse, but it is a way for us to at least rationalize a little bit that, okay, this isn't just our problem, it's something that we need to address based on either standard shifting or the age group.
Mhm.
Because you'll see that too. Or certain grade levels, you'll see a dramatic shift in proficiency levels,
Mhm.
which is always interesting.
And as across the district, we can also see just what measures that have been implemented in the elementary school level and how those are now showing a difference in the junior high level because those were all implemented 6, 7, 8 years ago. So now we can say, okay, these kids in 7th and 8th grade are doing so much better than the kids did 3 and 4 years ago because they've had this change in curriculum and way we're doing things at the elementary level. Well, this shows success. And then what else can we do?
I can tell you that we're seeing a major benefit in math with the inquiry-based learning that the elementary, because our teachers are doing it also with we're seeing that the kids are coming to us with a better understanding of the why behind the math. So that's already helping.
I say math is completely different these days. If you haven't been into a 2nd or 3rd grade math class, you probably should give it a go.
I don't think so. I think I'd have to panic.
But it's great because it's preparing them for the higher level math and they're having to learn how to solve problems in multiple different ways. There's not just one problem and one answer. They have to explain their answers. They have to show how they got to that answer and they have to do it in 3 or 4 different ways. So it's great. And I think hopefully we're going to start seeing those changes at the junior high and high school level. All right, moving on.
Yeah. Anything else on?
Anything else from building reports, committee program reports? Thank you, guys.
So I have, Jerry is on, is he back on? And if we can bump that discussion on the Timberline bill just a little bit while he's on, because he
Sure.
has to go elsewhere. So as you guys all know, and Jerry had a little insight, there he is, he's coming on. Are you in Hawaii?
Yeah, only in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if we can live it, why not, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you guys all know, the bid, we put out bids for the Timberline build. It came in at, what was it, 1.44 million. So what was decided, I guess, by you guys was to see if they could meet some of our demands on getting the prices down and all that stuff. And Jerry has that resolved. If you want to share that with us, and then we'll discuss a little bit what our next move is.
You're making it sound like a hostage.
Okay.
We request.
Yes, we,
Request.
well, it's all the same. Go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I think I sent you guys a memo. I don't know if you've had time to review that or not. But anyway, basically, I talked to Gabe French of Quality Contracting today, and he sent me a bunch of quotes and things like that. And we discussed if there were any things, there were any errors in their, their bid that would preclude us, that would help us out. And he said he said he met with their subcontractors, and he said he didn't really find anything. He said he found about $2,000 for substituting some gravel or something like that in his bid, but not really much. I know that he was wanting to keep his superintendent busy, and the only thing he commented on was he got everybody to submit bids, and he talked to them, but they didn't really say anything about changing things. So I guess that's good and bad. But anyway, subcontractor participation was light. One of the things that I can just kind of go through these. Did you guys have a copy of my memo or not?
So I just received, and we've been in session since 5:30.
Oh, okay.
He sent those out after 5:30. So
yeah, okay. Anyway, I'll just kind of, our project delivery schedule was ambitious, and that may have discouraged some bidders, but I think, the unprecedented market conditions is the primary driving force. We have interest rates that are pushing the demand for real estate and building construction. Contractors and subcontractors have a surplus of work and a shortage of qualified workers. Inflation is growing at exponential rates nationwide. The pandemic, of course, has caused supply chain issues as companies are still not at full capacity. And, what contractors are, they're at the mercy of as we are, of the suppliers and their subcontractors. And so the quotes are only good for a couple days. So we kind of have a perfect storm. Some of the things that added to the cost, from what we originally talked about was, after we investigated the electrical, we needed to do some work to upgrade the fire alarm and backfeed the electrical panels from our new service panel. So some unavoidable scope creep, but really, you said the electrical work was about 150,000 with the fire alarm, and we have a new 800 amp service which feeds the existing building too. So there's some things that come along with adding on to an existing building. You have to do a little bit of work, although it's not that extensive. I didn't think our tie-in to that. But it's so high, the cost above, we're so far apart on it. I wasn't very optimistic that we would gain any traction with the contractor and coming down. He seemed genuine when I talked to him about everything, about being able to do it, but mainly it's a lot about the market conditions, and the subcontractors really didn't have a lot to say one way or the other. So one thing we could do is, we could go back and review our drawings and specifications and send them in for plan review with the state so we can incorporate their requirements. One of the things I think I spoke with Chris earlier today about was that, there could be some requirements that we might have to put into the drawings that, and I'd like to do that in a more controlled manner instead of a change order. So basically, that's one item. I'd like to spend a little more time, looking at the extent of the donated materials that can be defined in the project bid documents. I know that probably raised a few red flags, but with the contractors, and they're very sensitive people. They're, I don't know, I think Michael and a few people have been to a few bid openings, but I always say that there's more drama at a bid opening than, or a bid review than there is at a high school prom. So anyway, let's see.
So Jerry, I think that's probably enough. And our action was that, or our recommendation was that if they couldn't get to our price, then we were going to reject all bids. And I think that going to the plan review with the state plumbing inspector, electrical inspector, and making sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed within the plans themselves. I ran into Jerry Schwartz with Quality Construction, the superintendent, and asked him if he would sit down with me and go over the actual materials list so that we can refine and go with a specific ask in certain places. And he is willing to do that. So there's no doubt that the timeline made some contractors not come to the pre-bid. They told me that. So they just cannot make that timeline. And so I think that regrouping, but not regrouping too slowly, because it's, yes, there's a materials and the market is going crazy. But we also want to get in the window of a work opportunity before the window closes for contractors and they're out another year. I think we want to keep this moving forward. So more information in relationship to the plans and what the state would require around permitting. And then the detailed information about the materials. All we had was the dimensional lumber for the building itself. That did not include the dimensional lumber for the trusses. A great example is the local truss company, and we chose to not submit a cost as a subcontractor because of the timeline and another question. So sitting down and having a conversation with him and saying, hey, how can we get to a yes here? You're right here in the backyard. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so
is it going to cost us quite a bit to go to the state to review plans?
There's no fee for that state plan review, is there, Jerry?
Oh yeah, there's a fee for it.
It's part of your permitting fee.
What are we
Yeah,
That's
talking
just part
about?
of it.
I don't know. I think the plan review, let me just check here. I don't know if I want to try to do this, but I can forward that information to you.
That's fine.
I was thinking it was based on square footage, but I don't know.
It is.
I was thinking
I
it was
want to
based on
say
square
it's,
footage. So I read
several
that, too.
$1,000s at least. I know that. So I think the permit's around 6,000. I think the plan review is a couple $1,000s or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Do we want to do that? You want to spend that? I think
I
that's
think
money
we're-
well
I think
spent.
we're in a better position if we do that, because then we won't have surprise change orders because of that. Right? So we
Oh,
eliminate that.
yeah,
Change
which
orders
can
would
be
a lot.
quite costly on the
Right.
job. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Just a lot of
And
money.
we don't really have a choice either, I don't think.
Right. You still got to buy the permit and go through the process.
Yeah.
As a public entity, you have to. So it was just going to be done a little bit during the process, not prior to.
Yeah.
If
So-
we do it prior, then
Mhm.
we'll have
Right.
less surprise potential.
Right.
We're permitted through the state then, not the county,
Correct.
because we're doing a,
Public entity.
gotcha.
Yep.
Public building.
Yep. The county won't touch it.
Yeah.
And Chris, Gabe sent me a bunch of emails on some of the material costs, and I forwarded those to you, so you can look through those.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
The
So
metal was pretty darn high. It was like 70 grand or something like that. So it it's just what things are right now. So
So a couple things comes with this. I mean, obviously there's no action item on this because you guys already done that. So that's kind of this is just more of an instructional where we headed. One of the things I need you guys to be thinking about is a couple things, I guess. One is our kids next year. So this dominoed a whole bunch of things, and I can kind of walk you through some of these things that it affects everybody. So without being able to do this, that took away our ability to bring that other trailer down because they're going to need that single wide. So the double wide trailer is the insurance company sold it. It's being pulled away. They were supposed to do that. I don't know if anybody's been up there, but they had moved the other one last week. Yeah. The little one got moved. We reset it or getting ready to reset it over by the other because we use that as an intervention space. That trailer was going to come down and help us out with our district office because we're going to be out of there soon in a few weeks and no place to go at this point. So we're still working on that. With that, we were looking at a space for district office, programs office, and also some food storage, which has not come to fruition, which we were going to open up the food storage from the elementary, which was going to give them another classroom, which is what she's talking about on space. So which allows us to put the preschool in the elementary school. So all of this, if you can see that, I mean, it's a pretty complicated thing, complex that one misfire has affected multiple buildings and multiple people. So what we need to do is we need to be thinking about what do we need for the kids up there. I've talked to Jason, Mr. Hunter about that a little bit. They've added another FTE up there. So they're going to have some elective classes, some art, Spanish, those type of things. He's talking that he can probably do that. And Ms. Kaczynski can probably speak to this more than I can as far as space wise. I think there's a need for space, obviously, because that one you were using like a computer lab that's smaller. It's like a half room or a third room or something. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So with that comes the challenge of what do we do for next year? And it all resulted from, the insurance company totaling the one building and it being removed. Now we do have the temporary classroom for the 4th and 5th grade that's still sitting there. We can continue to lease that next year. That's not a problem. We've already talked to them. They'll leave
Is that
it.
the
We'll
one
get
on
that.
the east end?
Mhm. The one
That's
that's
a
already
pretty
there.
poor building.
I'm not
It
giving
is.
up on this Timberline expansion.
Well,
School starts August 26th.
either way, we're going to need a
I'm
plan
not
for
either,
August.
right.
It may
So,
only be until December.
I am
or-
still on board with all this, but we need to talk about what we're going to do for this year while we're building.
Buy a double wide and buy a single wide for the district office.
Well, we're going to have to do something
that
for
gets us-
everybody.
Right,
Well,
but I'm
that-
saying, what if
yeah.
we put a double wide in to replace one that was pulled out there and we get you a single wide to replace what was supposed to be coming down here, and that buys us time and it's something that can be moved or reused or resold by the
Or
district
sold,
when
so-
we get,
Yeah.
when
Finding
we're used for
them-
more space, because we're
Yeah.
always gonna need it.
Availability is an issue. Getting them in the timeline to get it there before school starts, even now. So I've talked to a few different companies that are having a hard time, finding open classroom spaces just like that, or similar to that, even with bathrooms. And if they have bathrooms and we're not hooking those up, another issue. So it's a
How
lot
big are
more
you talking?
complicated. What's that?
How big? For the double wide?
The class, I think those are 26 by 60. Yeah.
I mean, there's a free one in Lehigh if somebody would move it.
Yeah.
I'm not joking.
Well, there's a free one that just left.
There you go. Right.
But
But I
it's-
mean,
you're
wouldn't
gonna
that,
put money
what do
into it.
we need to do to be okay by August?
Well, and that's the
Because
thing
clearly
is,
we're not gonna have an addition.
right. That's not going to happen.
So
So
what
we
do
have
we
to
do?
figure that out. So let's end Jerry's comments first and kind of get direction on that, then we'll go from there. So, because I know Jerry needs to go catch a plane, I think. So,
I'm about to lose my battery.
yeah. So if we go ahead and pursue like what Chris is saying, we'll go a little bit more in depth, but we want to rebid. What are we thinking for a good time to do that, Jerry? What's your recommendation?
I think it's going to depend on how much it's going to take the plan review. So I can talk with Lisa about that a little bit more. I have sent her documents, but they have taken no action on them because we didn't fill out the paperwork and send in the plan review fees. So anyway,
So, okay. So as far as feasibility, and I know I asked you a little bit about this, you had some comments about if we went ahead and tried to sub out the concrete work, the dirt work, and have all that ready to go. So next spring we could start in early. And is that a feasibility? Is it a thought? Is it something we can do?
The thing about it is, the only thing I worry about that is if we have a hole in the ground, it could very easily with the snow and everything be a safety issue. So,
Okay.
and then having something half built is never a great thing. You know, the minimum you'd want to shoot for is a shell.
Right.
So,
Okay. So one of the things, and Chris alluded to that really quickly, is the first comment that came out of the mouths of some of our constituents up there was, oh, I knew it wasn't going to happen. And that's not the case. I mean, you even said that too. I'm not giving up on it. I'm not either by any means. It's going to happen at some point, but I want to convey, and I want us to all convey that we're
Sure.
still working towards that really heavily, and we got to make it happen. But that assumption is, well, it's not going to happen. Didn't think it was going to, but we can't let that happen. So, and that's why, building some of it or getting started on it. I mean, as long as we continue to show that progress, I think it's really important.
I don't feel comfortable saying it's gonna happen. It's $1.5 million.
Well, at
So
some
I
point,
don't
we have to
think
do
that we should
something.
go- Right, but I mean, just saying it's gonna happen, I don't feel like is a responsible use of money that we didn't budget for this and don't have. So I
Well,
think that we should say we're going to continue striving towards this, but we're not gonna waste anybody's money.
Well, and I
We're
think
just not
that's
gonna
what we're doing.
spend that much money
But
Yeah.
It can't
Well,
be,
right.
right, it can't be.
Right.
because we do have the money.
Yep.
We just don't have that much money.
Well, we just
Right,
don't
I'm
want to
saying we-
spend the money
Yeah.
that loose.
Yeah.
We
We can do
budgeted
better.
after research and forethought. It's not like it was just a crazy number
Yeah.
that got thrown out. So
Right.
Right.
that's what we were comfortable spending
Yeah.
stakeholder taxpayer dollars. So I don't think we should just say at any cost, we're going to make it happen. I think we
Well, I
should
think
say,
if
we're
we're
not
not
giving
saying
up
that
on this, but
because we just
certainly
said
aren't
that
going
at any
to.
cost. We just obviously said that we weren't going to do that at any cost because
No, but I guess
we
we
rejected
could
it.
say, we've got to show them that we're gonna get this done. We don't know. Let's see if we can.
well, I
do
don't
it.
think we can survive in trailers forever, no matter what we do. It's just not right. We just need to figure out how we can build something and
But
make it work.
trailers might be a temporary
Yes.
solution
Yeah.
until it becomes an affordable project.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because if we had bid for this project 2 years ago, it would have been probably a third or a quarter
Oh,
of the
yeah.
price.
Yes,
And so we have to keep that in mind that this is not the right time to build.
right.
And we have to be fiscally responsible with our taxpayers' money.
Yeah,
And so
sure.
it might be a temporary solution that will get us through the construction crisis that's happening right now. And absolutely, it'll be a top priority for our district, but it may not
at
be
any cost.
this year. And it needs to be done responsibly.
Yeah.
So,
And I think we're on that path. I don't think anybody's arguing that
No,
at all. So,
I just looked at the temporary classroom and I go, oh, man.
so it sounds like there's a couple things that need to be addressed. Certainly, sounds like the plan reviews with the state, as well as a new timeline for
Yeah.
when this
Mhm.
project is expected to be done.
Right.
I'm not surprised that that scared people away. That was a big ask. And if we have a new timeline, that might get new bidders to be able to drive the
Mhm.
price down. So those were probably the top two things that need to be addressed. And then we can set out a new bid and decide if that's something that can
Yep.
be affordable or what can be done now, maybe by December or whatever date. And if it doesn't happen this year, what if there's anything that can be done now to prep for next year? Does that sound
Yeah.
reasonable?
yeah, and I think Jerry can help us with that timeline. We'll just keep in touch with him and we'll go from there. That work,
I
Jerry?
think Jerry.
That works
suggested-
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just one more comment. There's timing and the times of year to go out for bid. The best times of year are, in the late fall,
Mhm.
November, December. So
Right.
anyway, and then I think things are starting to break a little bit in terms of cost.
Yep.
But we're not seeing it locally yet. So anyway, maybe a little bit more time. We can still continue towards our goal, but just get our ducks in a row a little bit better. And then we can go out to bid, like you were saying.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Jerry,
you.
for your time.
Yeah,
all
thank
right.
you.
Yep.
Be in touch.
And then in the meantime, it sounds like our district has had a lot of experience with squeezing in.
Mhm.
We
We have.
have squeezed out of an entire junior high school into first elementary and now the high school in Orofino.
Mhm.
So it's time to start being creative and how are we going to squeeze these kids in for a temporary solution?
Mhm. And I have been, we just, Mr. Hunter was still in shock from all of that.
Mhm.
Maybe not so much shock, but yeah.
Yeah.
So we just haven't had a chance to get back together and talk about that, be a little more creative with it. So.
Mhm.
Yep, I'm good.
Programs office squeezing in.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Yep. Everybody's gonna get to squeeze.
They're gonna love us there.
Okay.
We're a fun bunch.
So it'd be good to have his input before we decide on what we're gonna do
Yeah.
up there. I
Yep,
think.
absolutely.
How he feels
Yep.
about it. Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you guys what the trickle effect was.
Yep.
It's what we're dealing with. So, but yeah,
And
there's a lot of it. Yeah.
Do you have a firm, I'm sorry, is there a firm out date at the district office?
They said July 1,
Oh. quite
but
firm.
I said I want to make sure we get our budget done first and get all this stuff lined out before we interrupt. So, yeah, probably first, couple weeks of July. Yep. Gonna need you to move a few things, Russell, for me. Yeah, he's just sick. I could see the look on his face.
he's
Oh,
not
no.
looking forward to his new roommate.
Yeah, well, he's not looking forward to his storage room becoming an office.
Ben's really short staffed if he wanted to move you.
I've said we need to go back in there, but he
into
keeps
the
talking us
bus
out of it.
garage.
I can drive, Ben.
There's your afternoon guy.
Okay, I can do it.
Put you in
All
a
right.
bus.
Yeah,
Mobile office.
yeah, that's right. Can we put Wi-Fi on those buses? Yeah, perfect.
There.
It's not such a bad idea, really.
Okay, so we'll start back up at the beginning with the discussion items
Yeah.
and work our way through.
It's up here.
So. Was there something new with board training?
No, that
Okay,
was,
it looked like it was an old one.
yeah.
Okay,
Has it happened?
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was, yep.
Okay.
We talked about it the last
Didn't move
meeting.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was already in the minutes
My
from
bad.
another meeting.
It's not a bad mistake.
Okay. Our sixth graders for band.
Good idea.
So,
Wouldn't that help with busing as well?
yeah. I don't know. You wanna go
I
for
don't
bus?
believe that is a no on that one.
Yeah.
Reason being is that is something that we can add to a non-benefit route to attract. Right.
It helps.
Oh, okay.
So there are some things that hurt us, and that being in the middle of the day isn't really that much.
That's really not that much help, Ben.
Just saying.
A lot of undecided for ending the year.
Mhm.
A lot of unknowns.
I
It's
mean,
not a very
really so
comfortable
much up
feeling.
in the air.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it just happened fast,
Mhm.
very quickly.
Mhm.
So we did a lot of planning to get to where we were, and then one piece.
Don't you think so? Just like with students being behind, like everybody's going through it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, behind is relative because every child in the world has had, social, emotional, educational setbacks and changes this year. I mean, if everybody's behind, are we behind?
Yeah, well,
I think that brings
yeah,
You know what would help them get ahead? Room,
yeah.
space.
All I know is July and August is really short amount of time to get something in place for
It is.
facilities wise. And then this just happened because of last week we were putting a lot of stake in that bid.
Well, but
As well.
even if the bid, if they could have gotten down
Mhm.
to what we could
Still short
afford,
time.
they were out to December 30th.
Yep.
30th. I
Right.
mean, there was a reality check of construction.
Yep.
Times. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but there's got to be a way to get someone more local, look at the materials list, see where we can go get some, and come up with a plan.
Yep.
So
Back on the drawing board.
Yep.
short-term, temporary, the District 171 shuffle.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
use it. We'll go with that. Financials.
Mhm.
Okay, so we finally, and this kind of goes into our negotiations as well. We ended negotiations last week, closed those on what was Thursday.
Mhm.
So once we had that, we were able to update all of our salaries and benefits and dump those in. It was processed one by one and then dump them into our other side, which is our budget side. And Brittany was working through that today, and she just texted me a while ago and said she had most of it done. So it looks like it's pretty good shape. So we'll have that completed here coming up, and then we'll have a budget hearing and then approval of our budget coming up soon. So with that, we had, you're supposed to have it, and I don't remember the exact dates, but we got to post it 10 days before our budget hearing. It's supposed to be done at least 15 days before our July meeting, which there's no way we can meet both of those windows. So we will post it 10 days before we have it, but we won't make that 10 days before our regular July meeting.
Don't they overlap? I
What's that?
remember thinking that
Yeah,
it
yes,
overlaps.
we'll be fine. It's just the timing. We didn't get the information, and then we didn't get negotiations closed in time. It's just the way it is. So we're trying to be careful with it and make sure we're doing it more accurate than rushing through. So that should be in pretty good shape. In the meantime, we're finishing up this year's budget and looking at what we have left or what we have going on. And a lot of what made it complicated was the CARES money and those type of things, the ESSER money that came in. And so we spent a lot more money in some areas that we wouldn't normally spend, to the tune of about 1.2 million, which a lot of those were excess. And we'll have some sheets on that coming up whenever we have our budget hearing. And also as we go through getting ready for our audit, some of those budget adjustments from revenue and expenditure. So we'll be able to see some of that a little bit more clearly, pretty close to that. So both those are happening simultaneously, and we'll keep you posted. So we'll have to have a meeting coming up probably the first or second week of July. We're going to try to post it tomorrow. I think she's going to have it all done enough to post the summaries, and then we'll have one after that. So probably need to talk about our calendar a little bit on when we can do that, but we can do that at the end if we can remember. Give me to go on. COVID operational plan. We're in phase 4 with the governor. So we have to submit a plan next year with the state, just like we did this year. So right now I'm going to submit the same plan with different dates. So seemed to be effective. We had a lot of input. Seemed like we made it through. Timberline classroom build. We just talked about that. We'll continue looking towards that one. Hiring procedures is one of the things we wanted to just talk about a little bit. And we can, if we need to do something in executive session, that's fine, but I just want to review our practices. So policy 5100 describes that. All of our hiring people, we always form a committee in the building. And if you guys want to speak a little bit more to that, you certainly can. Anybody there, but everybody does it the same pretty much as far as I know. I mean, that's been very consistent. So.
Yeah, so in our building for a teaching position, we form a committee. We try to get people content area specific. If there's any conflicting relationships, obviously we have to review that and make sure that they're not on that committee. So if they've, let's say, written a letter of recommendation for that individual, or they're a family member, they're then not on the committee because that doesn't put them in a good spot, and it can be considered bias. And so what we do in my building is after we've interviewed all candidates, we have a conversation after the end of all the interviews, and then I let them kind of sleep on it for a while, and then we reconvene and have another conversation. I give them as much information as possible as to like the master schedule and where that potential position could fit and what certifications we're looking for. So try and get as much background information. We also share that all the candidates' application packets with the committee, but all that stuff is kept confidential. I ask them to not share any of that stuff out, or even the conversations that we have in there, because it can put a staff member in a tough spot. So, but I can tell you that it's been a good process, and leaving those, can't think of one here that there's been a conflicting perspective. The committee has agreed on a candidate that hasn't had to be overridden or anything like that. So it's been a good process. We try and get, you don't want to put too many cooks in the kitchen. So typically I'm looking at a committee of 3 or 4, potentially for a teaching position. If it has a larger, that's not counting me. If we can get a few more, because it might be needed because of if they're teaching multiple content areas, then we do that too. And then we have to make sure that they're available because it's almost always done during non-contract time.
And
We
then,
use the same procedure. Our committees, we try to be representative of the different departments. So sometimes they're a little larger depending on what position we're hiring for. But same position as Brian, and we don't usually have much conflict as far as coming to a decision. We did have a situation recently where we had 2 very good candidates and it was very difficult to choose one, that hasn't happened in a while. So it was a good problem to have, but it was also not a fun decision to have to make. So it's good to have a committee that helps, kind of gel those ideas and come to that final decision about what's going to fit best in the building.
and the administrators are always involved in that selection process as well, not just the committee.
So sorry.
The administrators are always involved in that selection process as well, not just the committee.
Absolutely. Ultimately, it's the administrator's decision. But
You
like I
should-
said, I've never had
recommendation.
one where I go, you're all wrong. And it's always been a pretty clear consensus towards the end. It's a good collaborative process.
Thank you.
So the question came up publicly about certification and how that's weighted in relationship to candidate criteria, the scoring criteria.
Yeah, so for us, certification does play a role in what they're capable of either becoming certified in or what they're currently certified in. So if you're hiring somebody who's directly coming out of college, a lot of times they're currently in the application process. So it's either pending or it hasn't been applied for yet because they might be applying in different states, but there's parameters that you can see that they will gain the certification. It just depends on what it's in. So like for me, in my building, because it is a 7 through 12, it is a benefit to us if somebody has a secondary certification because they can then, typically it's a 6 through 12 certification. So then they can teach at the junior high level and at the high school level. And they're not just, because if they're, let's say, a K-8 certification, then they can only teach the 7th and 8th. And so it creates a little less versatility. But if they're so those are all the conversations we have in those committees is where does this fit? And with that certification, where does it fit to best serve where we're at with the others that have certifications in the building in that department? So you have to, there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle to make sure it works. You can't have everybody have the same certification because you wouldn't offer a multitude of things. So.
Well, and the letter was specifically about people on alternative that we got.
Oh, like ABCTE, the one.
Yeah, just wondering, are we giving, is there hiring preference given to people that are certified teachers?
I
Versus
would say
people that
there
might be on an
is
alternative
always
route.
preference given, but they aren't always necessarily the most qualified for the position just because they hold a certificate.
Right.
So we have to be really diligent about making sure that we're getting what we need to fill that position. I believe there's language in the policy that says the most qualified candidate.
Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't say most certificated, it just says most qualified.
Right.
I love people on the alternative route because I think they bring a wealth of
So we've had,
career, job,
I went
educational
back and
experience to it and we've made that choice.
I believe it was 2 years ago, we had 13 people that were on alternative
Mhm.
certification.
I think it's awesome.
But currently, you
Currently,
said-
there's 1.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
And
12 have processed through
Yeah.
and are now certified.
yeah, so as we go through that process, and we have probably a 98, 99% completion rate. I mean, it's pretty typical that once they start programs, they finish. And
Yeah.
you know, and a lot, even if you speak with veteran teachers, I mean, and I can't speak for all of them, but you hear them say a lot of times, you learn a lot more in the classroom through a year of teaching than you do in 4 years of college. You know what I mean? So that hands-on experience, you might come in thinking you're certificated and ready to go, but you're not always. And some are, absolutely. But that real life experience is
I think it was
Takes a long
rough at
way.
first when they first started.
Mhm.
Wouldn't you agree? Because we weren't equipped to know what they really didn't know because they
Yeah.
didn't go through the regular
right.
Mhm.
So once we started to learn, we were like, okay, these are the things that, you know.
Well, I think if they're on a K-12 route or
But they,
secondary route.
but if they don't, but if they only have a degree,
Right.
like in science, or they only have a degree and they've never been through any teacher method
Right,
classes
okay,
or
I see what you're
classroom management,
Right.
it's huge. You know, so once you go through a couple teachers like that, then all of a sudden Denise, because I went through this with Denise, we were like, okay, these are the things
Yeah.
that they're missing. These are the things we really have to work on.
Aren't a lot of them now that we're getting actually ed majors? Of one.
Yes, the hiring,
Secondary
I
or
think
K-
it's just the
yeah.
hiring pool fluctuates.
Mhm.
Like I said, I just interviewed two amazing candidates for one position that were both just recently certified, so that was great. But there have been times when we haven't, you know, there was one point since I've been principal, I had one candidate apply who wasn't fully credentialed yet. And I'm not gonna lie, it's a process to help them reach their credential and to be in the classroom consistently to help mentor them into the position. The student teaching experience provides so much experience that
Yeah.
you know, they really need before they hit the ground running. But some of the programs that they're getting themselves into now have evolved over the last couple of years to offer a much more rich mentoring experience outside of what they're getting in the classroom. So
That's just what I was going to say. There's it used to be just a couple of routes you could take to your certification. And now every university and college has something to offer.
And everybody's getting better.
Yeah.
Well, I think
It's
there's
more the norm.
a misconception too, that it's just like, well, you have this degree, so go ahead and
Yeah.
kind of fill out this paperwork and pay
Yeah.
us, and now you've got this
Yeah.
other degree. You're actually also
Yeah.
becoming
Right.
an educator.
Right.
And it's incredibly structured. It's not like you just have to turn it all in at the end of 3 years.
The other piece I would say too is from an outside perspective, sometimes they don't know where that individual's at. And so it might be, the perception is that they're just starting a program, and actually they've completed the program in a different district, and now this summer they're done. And so sometimes every situation is different, especially when it comes to alternative certification. Every situation is different. And so if you're not part of the interview process and you're being asked to, and people who are asked to not share that information, then it's just up to the eye of the beholder to try to make their own reality, I guess, sometimes. And so that's always a tough thing because you can't share too much.
It is.
So if you did, they go, oh, okay, well, that makes sense.
The uniqueness and
There's
it's
confidentiality.
really hard to say that because they all fill out the same form basically for the, every annually, and you guys approve those. But every single case that I've ever dealt with since I've been here, and even whenever I was in Missouri, it was the same way. Every one of them's different. You're like, oh yeah, that's just going to be standard. I can just, no, you need this piece. This is different. Everything's different. And everyone's unique because everybody has different background and different experiences and different classes and different,
I just think it's another example of us making the most of our local resources in an area that has fairly
Yep.
limited resources.
Right.
And it seems a real shame to not consider people with a wealth of other
Mhm.
experience and education when it comes to our kids. And I think also we hire people we trust to make good decisions. So
We also have paraprofessionals, if you talk about building your own, who decide
Mhm.
things and seen them in
Yep.
action in multiple educational capacities, and now they want to become a teacher.
Oh, that's
And, give them pathways to that. And that's a cool thing too.
I would say the majority of the alternative authorizations that I've worked with over the years have had some sort of experience in schools or in teaching some other thing, maybe teaching at the YMCA. There's been something that compelled them to do it. They didn't just come in off the street and say, oh,
What a
I
job.
guess I want to be a science teacher.
Yeah.
And there was some
Science is
process
the
there,
Yeah.
and they've had some background. And
Yeah.
Granted, my undergraduate degree was in the early 80s, but the only thing that did me any good for being a teacher was student teaching. The rest of that stuff was a waste of my time and money.
I honestly, when I went back to college at a later age, I was going to be a secondary teacher. That was what English teacher, that was my thing. And if they would have had the alternative then, this has been a while back, if they'd had it then, I would have finished my route in that, but instead I switched majors. Yeah. But true story.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the time in discussing this. I
Yeah.
thought it was important that we
Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Appreciate that, guys. So next up is truancy. So there was some question about that, and we've been working on that. We started getting a little bit closer to that before COVID times, and we've seen that truancy is, and I don't want to just call it truancy. It's just kids not coming to school for one reason or another. So I guess you can define it as that. And what we need to do in our current policy, it doesn't have the exact amount of days that they miss. It just talks about repetitive, consistent missing in that 30, 50. So at some point in time, I want to refine that. So in the meantime, we've talked with prosecuting attorneys and that process and procedure that they do. When a student becomes truant, they can charge the parent with a misdemeanor. And last year we've all talked about this. This last year we told kids to stay home. We made them go home in March of last year, and then we said stay home if you're not feeling quite right. All these things, and now we're asking them to come back. So we have to give that some time, but we also have to have a little bit of teeth in that. Our attendance rates are, not terrible, but they could use some work for sure. And a lot of times that it's like anything else, there's a small percentage, it's a large amount of the issue. So it's something we've talked about in leadership quite a bit over the years, and it's something we want to put just a little bit more teeth in. So that's coming in the future. But building that relationship with our local prosecutors and putting some teeth in that, I think is important, because it's important for the kids to be at school. I mean, that's bottom line. We've all seen that. When kids are home, they're not learning the same as when they're here.
I have a question.
Sure.
on it.
Mhm.
So what if you have a kid, and I know there have been examples of this has happened, where the parents don't or can't or won't get them up in the morning and get them to school. So
Mhm.
they're missing first, second
Right.
period consecutively. What happens if
Yeah.
that's
So there's something in there that talks about the consistency of missing the same periods if they're consistently late. I believe there's a piece of that at the end of that policy. Yeah, I believe so. Doesn't it talk a little bit about the hours there? There was something in that I just read through that again today. But yeah, we can do that. If it's consistent and they're consistently late every single day, yeah, that becomes a truancy issue. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I don't want to say this is always punitive, but it's kind of that last resort. I agree, and I don't mean to say that we're not doing those things, because we want to do everything else first. But yeah, right, right. Yep, absolutely, right. And that's why I think we need to have something that for those few cases that are not, so we, have a little something to lean on.
I was gonna say, the policy is actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's just if we're
Yeah.
not following that
Right.
policy, then we should adjust it to what we're actually doing, if what we're doing is appropriate and the policy is not,
Mm-hmm. Right.
because this is very straightforward. One day of truancy and parents get contacted and they are suspended. Second day truancy, they have a meeting with the parents and the principal. Third day of truancy, and they get referred to a counselor and they're suspended. And fourth offense, and they actually come to us for expulsion.
So
that's not happening.
No.
So we need to readdress
I
this.
honestly, I think we have a problem with saying you weren't here, so you're suspended.
Yeah, so go home. Thanks for coming, so I can kick you
Maybe
out.
you just call them.
And
They
so
don't
like,
have to
it's
come
in
in for
fact,
that.
it's
Yeah.
quite the opposite. Let's get them here and
Yeah.
get them hooked. What's really going on?
They're obviously not here because they don't want to be
Right.
here. And so suspension's not the
And
solution.
It's a variety of things, but the other part is, like you said, consistency. I mean, we can have all these policies, but typically what happens at the secondary level is you get hit with, so like if they accumulate enough that it becomes an issue, all those happen at once. And then having a system in place to be able to impart a specific policy at that moment in time is a lot. And so we have to have something that's feasible. We are investigating each individual one, because if it's black and white, then you're not doing the home visit or getting the kid the alarm clock or facilitating the meeting with the parent. It's just you did this, so you did this. And so it's I think there's something in there about administrative on all of the 33s in the state policy, because there's district policy, but then if you look at truancy, there's also state policy on truancy. And so the district policy is, I think, what you're reading off of, and then the state policy, it talks about seat time and credits and all this kind of thing. And so there's a lot of layers there when it comes to truancy, and you tend to get hit all at once. Typically, it's about the end of October.
So,
And that's when
so the reason that this was on here is because it's something that I wanted to bring your attention that we need to work on, because I do know it's not exactly what we have in our policy, and we want to reflect that. So it's something that in the future we need to figure out, and probably that's something that needs to go to our committee, which our policy committee has time now since we're done with all the policies, right? Right, Carmen? No? But we need to put some groups together and get some input so we can really get this hashed out, so we have something consistent and it's doable. Because right now it is just a gray area that we're not working in hardly at all. So. Yep.
One side of their mouth, they push mastery-based learning, so if a kid knows it, they should get the credit. But if they're not there enough days, they can't get the credit.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are contrary.
Yep.
So you can look at the state statute and the model policies that I've seen around truancy are, you've got to have one person dedicated to tracking it, even in a small district. It's not a very manageable situation. So I don't want to be gloom and doom, but it's going to take more than just having a policy, because you got to have a person to do it. I mean, there's a bunch of legwork chasing down, and it's so weird. The kid will miss weird periods throughout the day, and those to me are more truancy than if they're home and sick or whatever. Those skipping classes here and there, but it's a management.
Health and welfare right now is instituting a program where they're training local professionals to go through some training, law enforcement type individuals, and we will be able to do diversions from runaways and truancy. The program's called What Are You Running From? It's something that is starting.
Cool. Since I haven't been dealing with truancy for the last 8 years. My kids have gotten to school. But
when they don't,
in Canyon County and in Fayette County, it is a status offense, and there wasn't enough time in the system to deal with it. So saying it had teeth when it really didn't work either, because it never, the status offense never even showed up. They maybe in 18 months they'd have a date to go talk to the judge about not going to school yesterday.
It's different here, though, on how they process that whole situation. Usually what they find is that truancy is a symptom of a much larger problem. And generally there's other stuff involved, and yeah. And then
Well, the statute reads the parent will cause the child to come to school.
Exactly.
So if we're disciplining a child for not coming to school,
they
is that
charge
the right?
they charge the
Right.
parents.
Yeah.
They charge the parents, and that does get their attention.
Oh, yeah. That's okay. What? Oh. Your mic's not. on.
Mike's not on. Okay,
Mine's on.
sorry.
To hear me breathing, but when you're talking. Good.
I didn't really say anything important.
But now that's all you've said when they're
Oh.
recording.
Okay, so we're going to discuss the negotiated agreement, which Dr. Garrett is trying to send to the board members at this moment, since it will be in our action items.
Well, it just got updated just not very long before our meeting, so.
Mhm.
Let me share my screen again, put it up here. So essentially, you guys can look this over. So we went through the interest-based bargaining process again, and Christine and Greg were involved in that as far as members on that, and myself and Mr. Hunter. And then we had 4 teachers representing from that group. And we had lots of different discussions and lots of different items that came up at the beginning, and kind of how that works is we talk our way through, what are some of the concerns from both sides, I guess you'd say, and then we work to resolving those. And really, it comes down to almost every time, we talk about, of course, wages and benefits are always number one, and then of course some of the other things. I wasn't distracting or anything. Made me lose my train of thought. Thanks, Greg.
My wife. Sorry about
It's okay. No, I'm not done
I
yet.
just took it off airplane mode.
Yeah. So what we came down to, and I can show you, I'll just scroll down through here, and we had some things that were added. Everything stayed the same except for what's highlighted. So we're kind of way down to the bottom. Whenever we get to, there we go. So one of the things that the committee talked about a lot was our sick leave bank. We talked a lot about how that was going to be managed and how it is not being utilized probably the way it should be, and just the awareness of it, I think, more than anything. So we used what we had in our policy currently and then kind of modified it a little bit at the end, but overall came up with an agreement that we said, the sick leave is there if you're contributing, talks about how many times, how much you can give to it or when you have to give to it. And then as far as the committees, is something that we had talked about a lot on who's going to be on the committees and how that's formed and all that stuff. So the certified sick leave bank, 5 voting members, 2 staff, two who are CEA members and 1 administrator, and then the classified staff, 5 voting members, and then we have 4 contributing classified staff and 1 administrator. So it was a pretty easy fix. We have lots of days in that bank. That's kept at the district office. We generally don't share that information, because it does have a lot of, we can give you numbers, but there's some things in there about if it dips below a certain amount of days, we can ask for more as far as the certified or the classified, I think, or have an open enrollment basically. So as we're doing this next year, it's going to be open to everybody again. I think it says in there, you have to do it within your first 5 years or 3 years. What does it say?
5 years.
5 years.
Mhm.
So we're going to open it up to everybody again this year, just because of, like everybody is brand new, to give them a chance to be in that, since we changed some of the rules on it. So if they want to participate, they can. So I think that's a good piece to add in there. There are days in that sick leave bank. It doesn't get used that often, but they're there for if they need to be. In the past, that has been kind of managed through, there wasn't a really good system for it. So, it kind of came through a district office and it was like, okay, we have this form, but now what, and who does what? And so this defines it a lot more clearly. HR will handle the coordinate whether that is, how those days go through and how that gets paid and all that. So HR will be involved. Heidi's always kept the main form on that, or the main spreadsheet of how many days have been contributed and who's using and who's not. Tremendous amount of people who no longer work in our district who have contributed days. It was probably over 70% of the days contributed are people who no longer work in our district. So
Some weren't even alive.
correct. Yeah.
I was gonna say, is there a maximum amount that they can use? I think I was just reading that.
Yeah, sorry. Up half of their current contract or term.
Okay.
Is what, and that's the way it was before as well.
Okay.
So if you got a 174-day contract, you can use half of those. That's what you could be awarded. And then we also talked about if you do utilize those, and if you come back, you can ask again. But that committee has to make that decision. But generally, that's kind of the line right there.
So when you start this
Mhm.
in the fall, everybody will know
Yep.
exactly how many days you have it.
Yeah. How many days the person has in?
So that you're up. current. You have to
Yeah,
have
if you're
5 days.
current, yeah. So we have a list of that, and we were talking about, like, on district day, we'll have a sign up if somebody wants to do that, and we can actually have that checklist if you are already there in it. I mean, we're not gonna have it laid out on a table, so.
Because that used to happen years
Yeah.
ago. Every year you would know.
Yep.
Oh, I have to add 2 more.
Right.
Isn't Bill going to present that?
Yeah. So yeah, Bill Sellers said he was going to present that during our district day.
Well, yeah.
So the
Go ahead.
concern was clarity too, right? So
Yeah,
everybody knew
absolutely. It was
how that
clarity.
worked.
And she
So,
just reiterated that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So the clarification thing is something we do need to work on, making sure
Yeah.
people know who are in it and who are not.
Right.
And it's touchy because there's some HIPAA laws there you have to work on, and if you put in and somebody beside you doesn't, I mean, it's kind of a hard thing to say publicly. So we're gonna have to just kind of do that at one by one, whether you're in or not, and whether your days and all that stuff. So, yeah. So that was cleaning up that language on that was, that's a big part of what we wanted to do on that. So that was a good one. At least some of these others are just dates that were updated on the negotiated agreement with holidays, those type of things. We added this on, so there's a preparation time piece of that, and this was a big push from the union about protected prep time, and we had lots of discussions. I mean, they were informative discussions and they were interesting discussions, but what it really comes down to is we can't operate if we say you aren't doing anything but prep time during that period. We can't really operate because there are teachers that have to fill in for other teachers. There are, we don't have subs. We don't have a big pool of subs. So, and there's just people stepping up doing those things. So that was a big piece. Last year we put in this wording that was going to give, the administrators, and it comes down to local because like our sub pool at Timberline is way different than our sub pool at Orofino High School, or Orofino Elementary, or Peck, or Cavendish. So all those are different, or the Youth Academy. So when you have a pool, there's different things you can do, but if you only have a few people on that list and you have 3 or 4 people out, somebody's got to fill in. And it's just part of having to do your duty, I guess. So we talked about that a lot. There was a lot of, feeling like, and this is a bad year to judge it because a lot of people had to fill in a lot of places. And I think we normally do, but I think it was more than usual because we had more people out than normal. So we added a little piece on there. One of the things was the comments were made about finalizing our master schedule, and then not, basically everybody disappears and we don't get back to that master schedule until school starts or right before school starts. And then there's some, just like what Brian's saying, he's got a teacher he hired that now is not hiring. There's probably going to change some of the schedule. He needs to let his teachers know as soon as he gets that schedule reworked or whatever's going to happen, so they have that understanding, and they do. So that's kind of where that prior to finalizing the building the master schedule, and that's to solicit ideas from their teachers as well, and input. So as they survey students and the needs and those type of things. So anyway, it was a pretty easy piece that didn't really bind us as far as the actual prep time, but also give them a little bit of support to teachers.
Seems like you would do that anyway.
We communicate our drafts. We use our teachers to help with the master schedule because there's something sometimes we don't see that they see. But if somebody fails on you in August, going back to the and that's going to affect things. And so for us, we always have prep time. But it's just different, we always have a prep period built in for every teacher. I'm confused on that piece as to what that does, but.
So I think, and I don't know exactly, there was lots of talking in circles on that stuff, but it comes down to the expectation of doing more and not having the time to prep for what they're doing. And we all know as teachers do more than just what's during the day. I mean, I don't know of any teachers that don't.
I think a
So.
part of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. You were there. You can definitely.
Was that there was a faction that wanted it carved in stone that you will contractually get this much prep time every day. And I think that became kind of the bone of contention is that's really, really hard to do on a lot of different levels because of you having to have the flexibility and who's accountable for it. If you're going to have it contractually put in there that the administrators will make sure that these teachers all have X amount of prep time every single day, then who's going to account for it too? Because I think there's an accountability aspect there too. So there is a lot of ins and outs to it.
And the conversation leads to just as simple as in this negotiated agreement, it says you can't leave, like if you're going to leave, we're going to charge you a half day if you leave an hour early. Well, the flexibility of that, of being able to leave that hour early to go to your kids, whatever it is, or your own appointment, we do that all the time. So, I mean, from our standpoint, we're not following it either. I mean, if we're going to have to put things in stone, and like Jason, Mr. Hunter said this, nobody wants to work in a place like that. You don't want to work in a place that if hey, I've got to leave 10 minutes early. for my contract time or 30 minutes or whatever. And somebody else says, I'll cover for you. I mean, that's what happens and that's what we do in the workplace. We all do that.
You don't
So,
want somebody going, "Oh, no,
yeah.
sorry."
Yep.
I'm not
Okay, now.
convinced that was being driven initially locally.
Could be.
Probably right.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
Yeah.
But we didn't really change anything.
No.
We did.
So.
No, we heard them out and I understand, that there's always been more and more put on teachers more and more all the time. We get that. And this year was an exceptional year, but we can't operate like that. And I mean, there's just
Lose
no way. to do it.
flexibility.
Yeah. We got flexibility on all sides.
Yeah.
It works both ways. So.
Make everybody
Any
fine.
other changes?
Yeah, so this is a new piece that we've added in this evaluation and advanced professional committee. So as you guys are aware, there's a new rung on the career ladder. I guess it's an AP1, AP2. So to do that, there's certain criteria that you have to meet to be eligible for that. Well, as we submitted applications, most of our people were not eligible for that. We had, I think, what we say, 11. No, there was 9 out of like almost 30 that we submitted, something like that.
Right.
And you have to meet these criteria. Well, if you don't meet the criteria, you don't qualify that. That means more money for the district because they get paid at a higher, it brings our average up
Yeah.
from our, so our teacher-based apportionment. So what we put in there and what we were looking at doing was having some language so we're all on the same page. This comes back again where I said the principals are going to do some work within each other's buildings, but also so we're having the same type of terminology and the same type of processes that we're doing. And we do have that. We have Idaho code that already tells us when we have to do them and what we have to do on evaluations. So we follow that. It's more of the terminology and the wording of how we use those on our reviews and evaluations. So this was kind of pushed to being a across the board type thing. And really we kind of stood our ground on this as far as from an administrative standpoint. I said, I want my administrators on here so they can all talk about this. And we figured out that wording. One of the things that they really wanted to talk about was if we have a student, and this was the example they used, and I didn't disagree with this, if we have a student that is failing a class or whatever, takes a test, they fail it, do we give that kid a second chance to try to make up for that? And try to pass that. Were they not paying attention? Do they not get the skills? What was it that caused that? And the same thing with educators, we want to help them grow. So if they have an area of focus that we're trying to focus on, do they have a chance to provide artifacts, whatever it might be? Because if we do an evaluation, it might be a point in time evaluation. And is there a way we can support that? Well, I think we already do that. I don't think we did anything here that we're not already doing. So we already give them a chance to support the actions that we're taking, not to dispute it completely and saying that, they should be distinguished instead of proficient. But if they can prove artifacts that are saying, here's what's happening over time, is that the case? I don't know. And I think doing evaluations is difficult for everybody to get in the rooms to do them timeliness and, effectively and efficiently. It's a difficult thing for principals. So
We had a lot of discussion.
We had a
about
lot of
this
discussion.
because there's a big concern, obviously, because the rules have changed.
Yep.
And so we're going to have put together a committee on this.
If I'm reading this correctly, then we need to have evaluations done before the beginning of the fourth quarter. So anyone who's less than
no,
distinguished. can
no,
be
we still have
granted.
to have our final one. And that's what that committee is going to work out. No, we're just going to follow state Idaho code. This was what the process was for that. This was not,
Because you're not ranking them all
no,
until the end.
right.
And that's some of it's not due
Yes.
until
June-
this year.
June 30th this year.
30th.
Yeah.
And so, but in this, it says professional development will occur by the end of the third quarter. Is
No,
that targeted professional
the
development?
professional development is what comes out of this committee.
Yeah.
It's not to do with what they're doing. So basically, and maybe it's not written the way what we were talking about. So when we go through it, it says the committee will have all components of the evaluation process determined by the end of first quarter. So the committee's going to get together and say, what are these? One of the things they were asking about was, for example, what's a leadership? That was a big thing. What is considered a leadership role? Not just leadership stipends. What's a leadership role? What do those look like? And defining and giving some good solid examples for our district. So that was going to be done at the end of first quarter. And by the end of second quarter, the committee will have a plan on how to provide the training for staff. So this is how are we going to get that information to the staff? So they all have the same information, not the evaluation. It's what are we doing? These pieces that they're asking for. And then by the plan, so the third quarter professional development for the teachers to say, these are the list of things that would count for leadership. And that's just one piece of it. That's just a little piece of that example. So we're not all over the place on how that looks. This advanced, this AP1 stuff, all the advanced placement stuff has some very clear definitions by Idaho code, but they don't give definitions within, they leave it to the district. So that's what this piece is for, to fill in those blanks. It's like, yep, you qualified for that, or no, you did not, because it wasn't on the list, or yes, it was. That makes sense? And the other piece of that is if there's something that, like by the end, if they're looking for that distinguished piece of it, that's the process we need to work through. How can they show that they were distinguished? If you go in and you say a teacher is proficient but not distinguished in an area, can they show that they were more often than that time that you just walked through or you did your evaluation? And I think that's fair if you can show something consistent in there.
That completely is contrary to all the training we got with the Danielson model.
Yep. The state did.
You put your toes in distinguished, you live in proficient.
Yep.
So if you want to just give everybody a trophy and say it's T-ball, let's say they're all distinguished like we used to.
Yep.
I mean, that's ridiculous. Either we follow what we were trained to do or we don't.
That's the problem with this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now they're tying pay to it.
Yeah, there's money involved.
And, levels of proficiency and stuff. And so somehow we have to work out, this is why we wanted to put together a committee, which would,
because we can,
instead of putting wording in the contract that, we probably wouldn't be able to, we just weren't ready to do that. You got to involve administrators and so forth. And so we can put together some ideas and come up with how are we going to handle this? What's it going to look like? And it's, there's a lot of concern about it. Teachers are pretty worked up about it because,
Yeah, and with what you
just
said, that was-
exactly what.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean,
That
we
was a
can't just-
conversation we had.
Yeah, exactly that.
We actually had some really great conversation.
You can't cookie cutter it and say,
I thought it
okay,
was
well,
fun.
it's attached to pay
It
this
was
year.
intense. It was
So
great.
let's make sure
It was
everybody gets.
fun. It wasn't a bad deal.
You can't do that.
No, I think
I'll
it
tell you
needs to
what,
be part of
pay a
our,
teacher worth their salt. If you give them 2 weeks to prepare and they know when you're coming in, they should be distinguished at that point.
well, maybe that's what we're looking for at this point. We have to decide what this is going to look like.
The reason this ended up in here is because we weren't going to make that decision.
Yeah.
That's a decision needs to come from the front line.
It's just starting to get good.
You're looking at me like,
Trust me, this took a while.
Yeah.
This was
There was-
a conversation.
Well, I think one of the luxuries of having the administrators on this committee is that we can have that transparent conversation with those certified teachers and say,
Yeah.
hey, this is not how this framework
Right.
works. Let's walk through this framework again and kind of revisit that with them, because if we're able to say that and have that clarity with them, we sit on that committee and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Yes,
saying
for,
to them, hey, the Dennison model is meant in this way, and so we're not going to give you a roadmap to distinguish, because that varies. And, providing artifacts, I think the sentence that during fourth quarter staff will have the opportunity to correct deficiencies, you're gonna obviously have to make sure that your staff is like aware of where they're at that level, but if they're not, most of them are not gonna wave a magic wand in the
Right.
last 8 weeks and fix
right.
whatever they don't have at that
Well,
moment, but
that's the wording that I'm getting caught up on,
Right.
because that is saying that they have to know whether they're proficient or distinguished prior to, because if you're giving them an opportunity to correct that in that last 8 weeks of school, they have to know what category they're in prior to that last 8 weeks of school to make that correction, according to this, right? Yeah, proficient or distinguished. So if I rate someone as proficient and they're like, well, I want to be distinguished and I've got 8 weeks to do it, I want you to come in and watch this. That's a tough one. And if you've got, because they're not due, your summative isn't due until that June date. So that doesn't make a lot of sense.
This is exactly why.
But if it's written in
You gotta,
their
you're gonna,
contract,
yeah.
then
No, you're right. Yeah.
it's going to create a very difficult, because domains 2 and 3 aren't something they provide artifacts
Right.
for. Those are things that you observe as
Right.
an administrator, not something they typically would provide artifacts for. Domains 1 and 4 are where they provide their artifacts. And so that is different than, because that's saying you have to have their ranking in place prior to fourth quarter. And that's not, because, yeah, that'll be interesting.
There needs to be some discussion about
But it's
all
written.
this. Yeah. No, it's not. It's not an agreement. This isn't actually in the agreement. It's just that we're going to have a,
Well, it is in the agreement. That's what he's, yeah. It is. It is. the
oh,
agreement.
gotcha. Okay.
This
what's
is
the
the
part- what's
contract I have to
problem
sign.
with the agreement?
So
What's the timeline for that?
we need to be approved today in order to stay within regulations by the state.
Basically, it just moves our responsibility of getting our summative evaluations done to 8 weeks prior, what the state requires. Is what it
I
does.
don't think so.
Or
I
more.
don't think that's how that was supposed to be.
Because you
worded.
have to do two formatives and one summative
Right.
in that short time
I
span,
don't
which is hard to
remember
get
doing
to.
it that way.
I don't either.
We're just gonna form a committee.
I mean, but did the teachers on the committee agree to this?
Well,
Well,
Really
I-
busy that
I
last
don't-
week of school, just making sure everybody's
we didn't
distinguished
first have
now.
an Opportunity to correct deficiencies
no,
in the fourth quarter. That wasn't in there.
no, I don't remember
Yeah.
that.
I don't think that's right.
I was working on my notes.
In your notes? Oh, because you had the same.
Yes.
Well,
So we,
And we're not in a position to not accept it because we have to be within, I mean,
The
We
board
have
has
to
the final say.
accept, yeah, we have the final say. We have to approve this tonight. But we do have to have an approved negotiation by June 22nd.
and can we change what we see here as an edit?
It'd have to
to
be,
approve?
oh, it has to go back to negotiations if there's any changes.
We'll
We
have to
can't
ratify.
change anything. We either accept or reject it, and we can always accept all but a certain piece.
I wish it was
But that would
more-
have to go back
needs
to
be more general
negotiations
than
for that
that.
rejected piece.
That was the whole idea. of having a Committee was making it.
And then back to us
whatever
by
the
June
guidelines
22nd.
and, Yeah,
Yeah, I don't-
it's the first time I've seen this.
Yeah, me too.
since
Yeah.
I made it, yeah.
yeah.
I don't think that
So
was
can
the
we
intent.
exclude, can we exclude this?
Well, so what I'm hearing right now is that our two board representatives are saying that this is not what they agreed to during negotiations.
That was not our understanding of that particular piece of.
Got to be that specific. My main understanding was that we were going to form a committee which included all the interested parties, including administration especially. The concern wasn't so much, I mean, initially was they want to make sure that the evaluations happen consistently too. That was one of the concerns because obviously, like don't you have like 30 teachers?
yeah,
Pretty
they're
hard to
not-
get to
they're
every.
not wrong about that. I think everything's
Yeah.
good in this.
Yeah.
Up to that piece. I
fourth
think we
quarter
need to
to
be very
correct the
careful on the
timeline.
wording of that piece. But everything else is wonderful.
I
think
agree.
We do need to have a better education on the about it process and try to have more consistency. But,
It's that one sentence.
it's the last one that I think,
Mhm.
and we can do it. I mean, it's just gonna be,
No,
it's gonna take us out of the, and then it does force your hand with that last line in there to say, okay, if I've got 20 evaluations to do, let's say as the principal, which I do actually,
Yeah.
potentially, then I will end up, if, I mean, that's just gonna shift a whole lot.
We just don't want to get into a contentious type situation
No,
and,
we probably would, but I'm just,
yeah.
I'm saying it, I would be careful with that last piece of it
Well,
there. And I can,
think what
and I can
I'm-
get it done, but
What I'm seeing is, if you're implementing the framework effectively, you're not going to have the majority of your teachers be distinguished. I mean, that's just not reasonable.
unfortunately, that's
Of
probably
course,
true.
that should always be everybody's goal, but
Yeah,
what we're looking at as administrators, if this stays in place, is potentially having to reevaluate 3/4 of our staff in the last 8 weeks of school,
Which,
if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
So that we can allow them to fix those and become distinguished.
Is this in conflict with the actual due date to the state for evaluations? Because this is saying June 1st.
It's June 1st for the submission to the state, but this is saying you have to have them ranked
Mhm.
8 weeks prior to that so that they can have an opportunity to improve in whatever category you want to mark as proficient or distinguished.
Mhm.
Because on your first 2 year formatives, you're
No,
not
no,
ranking.
that
That's not
nails
going to
down.
help them grow. And they're right. I mean, it's not a perfect system all the time. I can tell you from my perspective, I don't do as good of a job as I want to with evaluations because of time. I always put it on that, but because of time, you're supposed to have a pre-conference, which can take up to an hour, a evaluation, which you're in the classroom maybe for a whole period, and then a post-conference. That's just one formative. So you have, it has one teacher, and so
one round.
So this could be for
So
potentially
you add
20
all that up,
teachers.
That's roughly 9 hours per teacher. So that's over a full contract day, total per teacher on 20 days. So that's 20 contract days just for what we currently are supposed to be doing. Now, they're not always like that because some teachers are like, I don't need to sit down with you for an hour. Come in and watch my lesson. Here's my lesson plan. We're good. They don't, it's a waste of time. But what that does is it potentially takes away from the work you do with the teachers who maybe do need that additional time, because that's where you tend to focus a lot of your energy.
Maybe
So what is the
as I
timeline?
listen to the intent language there, perhaps it's only if they're basic or unsatisfactory that you go in and reevaluate that piece.
But it says proficient or distinguished.
That they're not proficient or distinguished.
Below proficient or.
It does say
distinguished. So if they're
below
below-
proficient or
so if
distinguished.
they're below distinguished.
Right, if they're
If they're
proficient.
proficient, they can still, or
I would interpret that if they are
base.
below proficient.
Basic or unsatisfactory, you should be.
But it says
If it's
below
basic or
proficient.
unsatisfactory, I'm totally good with it. But
I
This
think
is
that
why
was
we
the
didn't want to
intent
be,
of-
yeah.
Of some of it, because I specifically asked that question because we were talking intently about the whole AP thing and the whole distinguished thing. And I said, well, shouldn't the teachers that are below proficient and at a lower level that have improvement to do have the same opportunities to improve those skills just as we're doing to try to get somebody up to be distinguished?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm not.
If the teacher's basic, this doesn't even really apply because you're already working. with them.
Right, right.
Give them a chance to, opportunity and resources to grow.
Right.
But if they're proficient and they're trying to become distinguished, then that's a whole nother.
Would
ballpark.
it be out of the question to say that they should know at the fourth quarter what they need to work on for the next school year as far as skills and
That's what
development?
that's what your summative evaluation is.
Right.
That's what
And I
it's
think
all
that
about.
was what the intent maybe of what.
Well, I think because on the AP, you have to have distinguished in categories. I think it's two or three for how many consecutive years.
3 of the last 5, I think. it
And
was.
that's overall ranking and distinguished from those categories. So if they don't know that they're not going to be ranked distinguished prior to fourth quarter, they haven't had an opportunity to try to become distinguished. And so it turns into a push-pull relationship rather than what the Danielson framework was intended for.
Yeah,
which was
that's-
for teacher improvement.
I think they've had 3 quarters to become distinguished, and if they haven't done it then, they're not gonna do it in the next
8 weeks.
8 weeks. So let's talk about next year, doing what you need to do to be distinguished.
Next year.
Yeah, I don't think that with 8 weeks to go, we're gonna fix that. If we're truly utilizing the rubric as we're supposed to.
My understanding is that that's what the committee was going to do, which was to include discussions like what we're having right here.
Absolutely.
And to get this all ironed out so everybody's on the same page and understands what's going on and what is realistic about this. And I don't think,
Those are healthy, but there
yeah, I don't think,
might be some verbiage there that.
Yeah.
was kind of-
So I feel like this is probably too specific
yeah,
and that it needs to be reworded.
Yes.
And we need to be a little bit more vague and let the committee make those decisions
Yes.
rather than have those specifics in the contract itself.
Yeah,
So I'm going to ask for recommendation from one of the board members who sat in on the negotiations, because you guys have the relationship, you have the good faith understanding of what that conversation was, of what we do with this piece of the contract. And we have a couple choices. We could accept it, except for this section. We could accept it and recommend a modification, like below proficient, let's say, or we can accept it with a modification of something more vague. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But do we have to go back to the negotiation? We have to go back and.
So
I don't know. Can we talk about this for a minute?
And honestly, I don't.
so-
want this conversation to hold up negotiations, because if this is what we have to make happen this year, then I will make. it happen, because Negotiations needs to move forward.
And
but
we had no,
I just want to be very careful.
It's not really the.
and we had
intent of
no
what we-
intention of making
No.
a whole crap load of extra work for you guys,
No.
or making your lives more difficult, or making it, that was.
But this will make a lot of
This is a
difficult work at
very
the end of the
important-
year.
Will,
Well-
it will, and that was not being.
But it's a big thing that's on there. This is a big discussion item, and we can't just sweep it under the rug either.
Absolutely. Opportunity. You can't
So,
do it, yeah.
I mean, it was
That's
a big part of the
exactly-
negotiation, really.
I think the committee's healthy. I think everything up to that point is very reasonable, and I think they're right. And I think it's something we.
Hence why we wanted to have administrators in on the conversation.
You can strike that and have the committee come up with that other piece. I think
That's a great
And you
idea.
guys might come up with something that
Yes.
totally just rocks us right out of the water and is way better.
You guys are and they're every much as engaged as the teachers. I mean, look, they want this to be right too. I think we should just move, I think I just moved to strike this part out of it and then talk about it and get it more clear in the committee meeting. So that's what I would move to do.
Yeah, so the committee there was two pieces to it. Number one was the committee, so we could hash that stuff out.
Yeah.
And number two was a timeline, so it doesn't get forgotten for a year.
Yes,
Those are the
exactly.
two main things that we talked about over and over. It wasn't what's in. Timeline was for the committees, for the committee progress. Yes, I agree with you, but that was not the intent. The intent was to have the committee basically check in each quarter. Like, this is where we're going to work towards in the first quarter, this is the second quarter. That wording probably doesn't explain that, but that, to me, there's two things on there.
Maybe
One
it
was a
needs to be
timeline,
clarified a little
yeah,
bit or
and
something.
the other was a committee. That was where I was at with it, so. It wasn't going to dictate what the principals were supposed to do at that
No.
time. It was to have the principals and the teachers involved to figure it out.
So it would be easy. It might be easy to inject a sentence. So the committee will have all the components for evaluation process in the first quarter of 2021.
Yeah, that was.
So,
that's- Yeah,
and,
that's correct.
and drop the rest.
I think you could just say that if you're it depends on what you want to eliminate, but if we eliminate and just say, well, there's going to be a committee to review this process, it consists of.
Yeah,
that's it. And
that's it.
they will establish a timeline and report back. We need to make them accountable through to report back to the board, I assume. Myself or whatever, for each
Somebody.
quarter. Because that was really was the accountability piece of that.
Yeah.
Didn't want to get it lost.
Yeah, in no way did we want the administrators to be tied down and to have them do
Right.
evaluation and all that.
So you could say the committee, the last sentence could go up after the October 28th, 2021, and then then you could say the expected reporting to the board by the committee will be on these days quarterly. If that's really what those quarterly dates are about, and you want to have dates for accountability in there, then you use a lot of what you have.
Right.
You just
Right.
reword it and twist it so that it's clearly around the committee's task.
Yeah.
Applicable state guidelines.
right?
Well, there was a lot of discussion
So that we
about
know
that we're
when
already
everything's
following
safe.
Idaho code. We already have all of these
already in the
timelines and
code.
everything in there and guidance through the Danielson process. It's already in code. We argued that a lot. It's like, okay, but we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Administrators, teachers, we all understand where we're at. So that was the committee as far as I was concerned, but obviously we weren't all.
Yeah. We need
Yeah,
you
I,
guys to fix it.
The sentence in question is during the fourth quarter, staff will have the opportunity to correct deficiencies that are below proficient or distinguished, right?
yeah.
What does that mean? What was the intent? And that's not very clear. That's the only thing that's not very clear.
I think that that it should have been something more on the lines of by the fourth quarter, the staff member will know what their deficiencies are, and they should know by the fourth quarter what their deficiencies are. Not that they necessarily can say, oh, okay, let's scramble and fix that.
If you're proficient, you don't have deficiency.
No.
That's-
Right.
you know, and so that's, yeah.
Was there to fix?
That's true.
Work.
Yeah.
Work harder next year to be better, but.
That's
if
it.
you're Proficient, you're proficient.
Mhm.
And proficient's not a bad thing. Rewrote is, it's your.
Yeah, no,
This is holdover from years ago when we evaluated differently and didn't have a rubric tied to it. It's
Mhm.
made the corner.
The timeline's basically on exactly what we wanted.
Yeah.
It's just that last.
Yeah.
just that
one
last little.
Little statement.
So what's our suggested fix, committee members?
Figure it out,
Let's pick that one line out.
that one sentence.
During the fourth quarter?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just take that one sentence out.
I think that's.
And is the evaluations being due to state by June 1st? Is that
Mhm.
correct? State code.
Yeah.
Yeah. They extended it this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not on.
Next year's
Typically it's
June
June
1st.
1.
Okay.
Yep. And it should go back
All
to
right,
that.
so now we have discussed it. We are not yet to action items.
Yep.
So just keep that
Hang
in
on,
mind.
there's
for-
still more.
Yep.
Yeah, so now we're down to the dollars and cents. So looking at, and we talked about that on our insurance, we were going to cover that cost as a district. It was about $63,000 additional increase. We did receive some increase from the state. I meant to look that up a little bit, but they gave us, I think, like 1.5% on top of, what was it, 300 per person or whatever. So it's minimal whenever we're paying 800 per person, but there was some there to offset a little bit of that. And we put a memorandum of understanding, which we had this last year as well. And this was something we had talked about, this is something they were going to take to the union on when we do the contracts again, when we get them out. We already submitted contracts to the certified, but probably the best way, and my recommendation was just to wait and do it at district day. So we have people there, because chasing people during the summer for a contract is just not very feasible to get them to return them. So our salary schedule, what we looked at was this for certified staff. We looked at 3% on the base, which is showing the white is last year's and the year prior. And then the green is, it's showing what it changes. So 3% on the base. These are pass-throughs. We've done this every year. A VA plus 24 is 2,000, a master degrees is 35. So that goes on your base, and that's where we end up. So you can see what the increase is. And then on classified, which is not in this agreement, but we decided we would do a 4% increase. On classified, we agreed to that, and everybody gets to move forward to where they're supposed to be as well. So when we did that, and we just dumped those numbers in, and Brittany just actually texted me a while ago. She said that we were within like $10,000 of what we received our revenue from the state versus expenses. So that was pretty good, pretty close.
That
What's that?
administrators.
So admin, same way we did. So certified was 3% on certified, and then support services, which is you end up with what counselors and speech and some of those all the way across, everybody certified. And then administrators, what we generally do is we do that 3% on the base, and then there's a calculation to go through with them as well. So that changes from the base on. That's principals and. Yes. Yes. 4. And they move to where they're supposed to be. So it's two forward, 4%. Each. Yeah, so the schedules, as you look at them, and we just added 4% to the entire schedule, and then people move forward as well. So it ends up about every space is about 1%. So it ended up almost 6% for classified, which is a great move.
And the district's covering.
Yes.
The different districts covering the difference in insurance this year. So
Yep.
again, that will be up.
Right.
That's so huge.
Yep. It's big.
Thank you for
Kept
staying
it the
with
same.
that. That's a biggie.
Yep. So yeah, we went through a lot of numbers for sure.
Everything's increased.
Yeah. So if the state, continues to put us where we're supposed to be, which they said in our projections are accurate so far, we'll be fine next year. So I'm glad to be able to pass that along.
Did we discuss insurance?
Oh yeah, we covered it.
Yeah.
We're covering it.
Okay.
I don't think I have the premium to just to have what was it on there? Yeah. So that's our plan of what it was before. So it went up 2.8% is what it went up, which was 63,000 something on top of for what we had. And yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Last year was 8.
Last year was 8%.
So really what it amounts to
8%,
is
it
it varies every year, obviously, with our number of employees and who qualifies for family and who doesn't, and who takes it and who doesn't. So I mean, those are numbers from this year currently, and that changes as soon as we hire or somebody leaves. So best we can do, snapshots. And I think that was the main things. Yeah, that's it pretty much.
Did the buy down thing that I can't remember what we changed on that last year. Did that
It stayed
remain?
the same. Yep. Yep. So we did, we took this language out that was old language. I don't know why it was in there. It's crossed out in the yellow there. So that was removed. It didn't really have any meaning to what we were actually doing on our salary schedules in the last several years. I think it just was leftover piece from several years ago. But, and
What
then,
about the verbiage with the 25+ years? Because I know that was a contentious point in the past. Is that consecutive? Or can you come back?
yeah, that's a decision you guys have to make. It says 25 years with the district.
Okay.
I don't think it says continuous.
Okay.
What? No.
Good.
So 25, if you do 25 years with the district, yeah. And then the other piece, we changed a little bit. This was way back. We changed a little bit on the coaching. We changed this last year, and there's going to be a change at Orofino Junior Senior High School with the way they were doing wrestling. I know that was still this year. Yes. Let's see. So primarily what we did is we actually saved a head coach position, because I think what they're doing is their head coach from, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the head coach is basically going to be the head coach for junior high and high school. And have the same consistent coach, and assistant coach is helping at one particular for junior high level, one at the high school level, and then of course the others is needed, like depending on the numbers.
I think that's right.
That was the major change we made with that. So
That
which
was
is fine by me. If that's what they wanna
Negotiation
do.
meeting number 1.
Yeah,
so
it
it's been a
was.
while back.
Actually, I think it was number 2.
Was it?
Yeah, but we've had
See,
like
I
5
don't even
since then. So, yeah.
Lost track.
So that was it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Everything else is the same. And like I said, we're discussion at this point, so we'll get back to. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for all the long night. Sorry.
I
Gotta
was
get through it.
joking about 11:30.
Yeah.
I didn't knock on wood.
Okay, 2 more discussion
Yeah,
items.
so the 5,400 leave, this is just an information going to you, and as we look through our policy, we've had in the past, the last year, we've had several people, mostly classified folks, who just asked to take a dock day instead of taking a leave day. So what it says in our policy is if they want to take a dock day, it has to be approved by me. It says by the superintendent. So what happens is if you do that, that changes, a dock day is basically taking a day without pay, but still preserving your job. Some people take dock days because they run out of FMLA or whatever it might be, and they have to take dock days to still stay on. So these particular cases, as they take those dock days, it throws us off on our HR payroll system. So let's say we have an employee who's paid over 12-month period, works 9 months. They're divided up in 12 equal payments. They work so many days, basically per year. And we divide those up so they get paid equally. You take a dock day, you pull that out of there, then you got to start again and redo from there on. Basically, it messes up your salaries at that time. So the question became, and have a new payroll HR person, didn't know the difference, and that's fine. She's doing a great job. But so we had that discussion as we pull out that policy. Again, it kind of comes up to a little bit of interpretation. But really, it says that if you're going to take anything other than a personal day or a sick day, your personal days have to be approved by immediate supervisor. Sick days don't have to be approved by anybody. But if it's a dock day, additional days, it says has to be approved through the district office, through superintendent. So I think we've got that taken care of. I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. And I wanted to make it kind of public. We don't want that to become a habit. It's very difficult to manage. And it just is, that's why we have days. That's why we have personal days to take. So, and then the next one, Carmen, you still awake? She's here. So this one on delinquent payments, this really comes down to some of our food service bills, child nutrition bills, and things we carry over. And I think there was a policy set years ago. You guys probably know that, Charity, you were probably part of that, that we don't really force a lot of people to pay. Well, we end up carrying a little bit of debt. This year, you just told me what's still delinquent right now is $5,500 district-wide. So it's hard to hold that over people's heads when we don't, and the decision was, and I understand that, we wanted to feed kids. We didn't want to have a kid not eat because somebody didn't pay their bill, because a parent couldn't pay a bill or whatever it might have been. But that's why we have, now it's all free, but that's why we had some of the free and reduced places, options in place. That's why we do all that. So we just need to talk about when we have delinquent bills, how do we go about collecting those and how much force do we put on people and how does that look? Because it's a difficult thing to do, especially in difficult times, but also we get stuck holding the bag a lot of times. And people will move out, they'll charge a big bill, then they'll move away from the district and we have to pay it. We don't have a method in place to collect. And we see a lot of the same people doing it. It's habitual. So
if everything was free, that's debt that's been carried over from a number of years.
Yeah. Some of it was collected before we went out in March, before they started doing the free last year, not this year.
Sending letters.
Yep.
And the letters get
Yep.
returned.
Yep.
Our mailbox.
So return to sender.
Yeah.
Address unknown.
She sends a letter, they come back to her mailbox.
Not for labor time in the kitchen.
Right.
The managers try to send those home. Teachers have to put them in the backpack. Elementary, they email them out to the high school. That way they start calling them on the phone. They literally go on the phone. They haven't been charged for any meals since last March.
So
And we put it in the paper, we said this will give everybody time to catch up. All of my mail now, I don't think I got one payment. We have families that owe us over $600 per family. There's somebody. It's getting to the point now, our debt's been carried over, some of them 4 or 5 years. And we have no consequences until we become a senior or a graduate. You don't pay your debt, you don't walk. This year we have girls say, I owe what? $200? When? I've been free. I've always been free. How do I get this money? They're saying 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It would be like you getting a bill in the mail saying you owe the electric company $500 from 5 years ago. You're going to say, why do I need to pay this?
Well, I know, but like
So it
how
takes a lot of time every week just trying to get something and it's not.
many hours of labor are we losing on money that we're not going to collect?
Well, 3
All of it.
managers plus myself on a weekly basis.
So we're throwing good money after bad. Why don't we just eat that and stop trying to collect?
Then write it off.
Yeah.
I mean, write it off.
I was gonna ask, we have.
Can we
So,
write that off and just err on the
is
side
there
of children
anything
being
new?
fed?
Is there anything different, or do you have any new solutions? I guess is the question.
Right now, what USDA is saying, we're gonna run free meals all next year as well, so it's just another year of.
Paying employees to try and collect debt from people that no longer exist. So that seems like,
Only other way to collect bad debt is to take them to small claims.
that's ridiculous.
Which would cost more than.
Which would cost more, and it's ridiculous. Let's just feed kids, please.
And just to give some historical examples, we have to be very careful of doing anything else, like giving kids a special sack lunch meal just because they have debt. That has had a lot of negative
they don't
feedback
have
from the
debt.
community. And even when this has been brought up in the past and made a bigger deal of, the community actually were horrified and raised funds to pay off the bad debt. And it made us look really, really bad.
When that
So,
backfired, in my opinion, it backfired.
Yep.
Because the community knew thousands of dollars was raised, so they just quit paying altogether because they knew somebody was giving money.
Right. Can we quietly just
So.
stop wasting postage?
Well, and it took 3 of us 2 days to hook up through Skyward. I had all the kids, but to find the parent's name and the
Oh my
address
God,
that
Carmen.
attached to the kids, and then how to import them out and label and mail them to have them returned.
I would suggest that we give Carmen this piece of her life back.
So I
For
guess-
employee retention, maybe we should stop doing this.
So, I mean, from the standpoint of a consequence, looking at moving forward, I guess I think, yeah, years ago debt and we've got free food for the next year ahead of us. Let's just clean the slate, but let's clean the slate and develop a consequence. So there's, you want to feed kids. Okay. I understand kids need food to learn, right? But there's other things that happen at school outside of the learning and feeding that are cool that could be closed off because you haven't paid your bill.
But that's not, you're
But then
closing
you-
off the
yeah.
child for the parents not paying the bill. And that's where I have the problem. Because when you shut a 6th grader out of an extracurricular activity that's in a family situation where they don't pay their food bill, that child just goes home to that house rather than having that extra support.
But perhaps that child goes home and nags and complains and pisses and moans at parent, and parent decides they're gonna pay, so they don't have to listen to them.
I don't think
I don't
it's that
think it's
group of
gonna work.
people.
There's a difference between the age of the child.
Absolutely.
An elementary child, not so much. Junior high and high school kid could make their own lunch at home. If there was something there.
If there's
They're a little
something
more
there.
independent than an elementary child.
I just think like 50% of the issues we discussed tonight, there are issues going on at home that cause these things. And when you're creating penalties and band-aiding it on the kids, and it just further isolates them from people they should rely on for help, safety, and comfort. So I lived on school lunches for several years when I was living on my own as a teenager, and that's what I ate. So it would have been really horrible to have that go away.
Well, but you probably applied for the free reduced lunch program too then.
I didn't. I was too embarrassed, and my mom said that I couldn't, or all support would have been withdrawn. So it's not that clear cut. I think it's $5,500 over the last several years, and we're looking at $1.5 million to build a classroom. And we're going to save $2,000 with some gravel, and we're thinking about settling for that. I just don't find this an issue. I think that we're here to serve the people of this community, and this is a constant problem in our community, and we should serve them by feeding kids.
Yeah, my question would be,
We can
could
save
we
that money
change the
somewhere else.
pay structure? Let's say down the road, we got another year of free and right.
Yeah.
So maybe when we start to start back in a normal situation, maybe they should prepay a certain amount of lunches or something before. How,
We have that set up. for
We
them
do.
to it. We have a scale if you want to pay for a week, you want to pay for a month, you want to pay till December, the Christmas break. This is how much it will cost you.
like a punch card or something like that.
We have PayPal, that they can pay
Mhm.
whenever they have money, but it's not the responsible parents. We
Yeah, I
So
understand.
The $5,500 in comparison to what we do collect, where are we at on that? How much do we collect versus? the $5,500?
Well, if I go back about 2 or 3 years, I think we had budgeted, it was like 60,000 coming in from payments from parents.
Mhm.
This year we got 10 because everybody was free.
Mhm.
Everybody was free.
Mhm.
But normal years, it's
It'd be 60,000 coming in. But then we have those, of course, we don't. But these, I think, are the same parents we see in every aspect of the education. That they're not qualified.
Well, and consequences don't work. They just punish children with this group. So my family is happy to donate $500 a year towards paying those debts off if that helps. Maybe we need a community sponsorship program. I think it's appalling that we don't have free lunch all the time. You're just going to further isolate kids. We're just going to further isolate kids by penalizing them. And if they have to hear about it from their parents when they get home, if the parents are being harassed, if the parents go to collection, can you imagine what that's going to do on that end? Don't go up there asking for lunch anymore then. I just think we should feed them and stop worrying about $5,500.
So you just want to write it off?
I do, yeah.
That's what we've been doing.
I think
Yeah.
it's good practice to come up with a system so that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's-
That's what I was
there's a
thinking.
way in the future, but ultimately I agree with you that there are just gonna be some that we just have to
Right,
say.
right. We should attempt in every way to make sure that kids are being fed and it's being paid and we're not being taken advantage of. However,
And I think
third
there's
graders are not
options
responsible
for
for
the
this
older
problem.
kids because there are things that they have their free lunch
Yeah.
and, with choices, they can have their box lunch with a sandwich or they can have the hot meal, but they don't necessarily get the extras, if they don't have money on their card. So they can always be fed. They can always have a meal, but they don't have to have the ice cream and the chips and the sundae, those kind of things.
They have to have cash, we don't let them charge it.
Yeah.
But those kids who have $60 in debt will come up and hand us a dollar bill and buy the extra, but they don't put it toward the debt.
then maybe we need to change that if you
Yeah.
have cash, you're putting it towards the debt.
Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, then they'll just stop buying anything. They'll just stop buying anything. However, right,
But it is, there's nothing new, there's nothing different. We can work a little bit on the details of what might help, but
We can get the debt done and not have to worry about any of it for
Yeah.
another year, but they'll give us a year. There's gotta be a policy in place, something when we come back, their charge. Because every year I have to do, I don't know what's called now, PO tool with the state that tells me I have to increase the price of meals, goes up 10 cents a year. And they said, Carmen, you will have to increase every year for eternity, there's no way around it. So next year, if they haven't paid, I suppose we have $3. The next year's gonna be $3.10, the next year's gonna be $3.20. So when they come back and they have to pay, for breakfast and lunch, and it's gonna be way more expensive than what they remembered when they did it.
Right. Well, and with
So
your,
there has to be something in place to address that, so everybody's on the same page and the parents know.
well, and I think too, with you having a labor shortage right now, I think this would just be money well spent for them not to be using their time to collect a debt that's not gonna be collected at this point.
It's not like it's money that's accounted for. Yeah. We don't have it, so if we still don't have it.
We still just don't have it.
And I
Like
would-
all the other money for education in Idaho, we just don't have it.
So, and I would suggest with Skyward being connected to the kids, that there should be a Skyward account to every child with an email address, and that can be a way of notification. So at least it's free and we're not using postage on top of everything else.
We
So,
do,
okay.
every week it is, sending paper copies home, the high school does emails home,
Mhm.
phone calls home.
Mhm.
And it's all through Skyward is the emails.
And I think we could just maybe come up with a plan that would simplify that using Skyward, maybe one phone call. But again, doing more labor for something that you're not going to get any benefits of is probably not useful time of energy and resources. And then I was looking through this policy and I think it needs to be worked on because a lot of the choices aren't necessarily choices that we've done in the past and would take a lot of conversation if we're going to change it. Like basically saying the children can't eat if they have a bill. And I think
JSD regulation says you can either, we
Well, you can, yeah, we've had a different policy here. So,
In that case, let's just write it off. It sounds like it's about, how many years did this accrue over? Was it just 1 year, or how many years did this accrue over?
okay. So let's, I'm trying to think, this is still discussion.
So
So we
it's
have to do
just
that
not
under
even
action
10%.
item. So
You
we,
can just
in interest
recommend
of time, let's kind of keep moving. All right, so I've even lost my page. Here we go. Almost.
Action
So,
items are fine.
action items. We're finally to action items.
Yep.
The first one is actually what we were just talking about between the leave and the school lunch policy, as well as the other 8,000s. And in this,
So the
Go ahead.
54-1 is the new write-up that we
Oh,
had.
new
in the
write-
negotiated
oh,
agreement.
that's right,
That's
that
the
is.
sick leave bank.
the sick leave
Yeah.
bank, yep.
Yep, so that was.
It was everything that was in that contract
Mhm.
in a policy.
Right.
So that it matches.
And it just rewords this current 5401 policy. Yeah, I thought it looked like it was a good write-up.
Okay. So we'll need a motion. And regarding 8245, and this lunch
Yeah.
issue debt, we can just make a motion and approve if we want to write it off. If we want to leave the policy as it is, change it later. Okay.
Okay.
I'll move that we accept the policy updates 5401-8000s. And in regards to policy 8245, I move that we write off the current debt to the district and revisit the policy later.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept policy update 5401 and the 8,000s with the directive to the superintendent to write off the lunch debt at this time and revisit the 8245 policy. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Negotiated agreement. So we need to,
I know.
we have a
I'm
motion
looking at
to,
you. You're reading.
to approve with any amendments.
Okay. I move that we approve the negotiated agreement with the exception of
Section 4.9.
section 4.9, the
Sentence says fourth quarter.
Fourth quarter
the
sentence.
sentence that, yeah, strike the sentence that talks about reevaluating and whatnot in the fourth quarter.
You did good. What? Oh, yes, I'll second it.
So it's been moved and seconded to accept the negotiated agreement with the exception of section 4.9, removing the statement regarding the fourth quarter evaluations. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. New hires and separations?
I move that we accept the new hires as listed with Mr. Two that are highlighted. And recognize the separations.
The two that were included were additions today.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
additions?
we just
Okay,
had- yeah, those are-
including
Yes.
the two that are highlighted
Yeah.
as additions.
Yeah, they were added after the posting.
Thank you.
So,
All
sorry
right, so
about
I
that.
move that we accept the new hires as listed below and recognize the separations.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the new hires as listed and not recognize the separations. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Executive session.
They got the gumption to go.
5 minutes.
I have nothing.
So,
On this
and
day.
I was gonna say mine can be under board member input. How's that sound? Okay. Okay. So board member input. Okay, so the things I sent today by the next meeting, we need to have an executive session to discuss the superintendent evaluation. And if we can get to it or start the process of the board evaluation as well as our summer homework. And then
That's
I
a
guess-
self-evaluation.
self-evaluation.
Yeah.
Mhm. And as a whole, that helps
be
us
too hard on
create our
yourself.
goals for the next year. So
I
you
like
can
that
kind of look
guide.
at it and judge yourself, but then maybe come forward with 3 ideas of what we want to improve on for next year, both personally and maybe as a group. And same thing with our evaluation with the superintendent. That'll coincide with our goals for the year and how our evaluation lines up with the goals for the year. Okay. And then I guess I'm just concerned about administrative contracts. Has that been approved by us through that negotiated agreement?
For the administrator.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so the principals all fall under that as certified, and
Mhm.
so do I. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
our administrative
Is that what
group.
you were asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I want, because I didn't see
Yes.
that specifically lined out in that negotiated
Right.
agreement, but it is in
Yes.
there.
Yeah,
So it's
and,
been
and we
approved.
have the flexibility because it does talk about certified and support services.
Mhm.
But certified can be, are principals as well.
Okay.
So we generally just pass that along.
Mhm.
That's what we've always done, and that's part of what we've done on the budgeting.
Okay.
So
Okay, good.
that makes sense.
Just wanted to double check that we
Yep.
didn't need to do anything separate.
No.
We want everybody to get what they deserve. So, okay. In that case, any further board member input? Thank you, everybody, for your patience of a
Hold
long
on.
meeting
Do we
tonight.
have some days that we can actually set a meeting for our budget hearing?
Oh,
Because we're gonna post it tomorrow. It has to be posted. 10
everybody
days.
go home. Good night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
all.
Bye. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks.
Have a
Sorry,
good
folks.
couple weeks.
Yeah.
What, your 3 days off this
Yeah.
summer?
Yeah.
I think I'll sleep in tomorrow.
Drive safe, Denise. Have fun.
So if we're posting tomorrow, which is June 22nd, 10 days would be, and it's 10 calendar days.
I wrote this down. Where-
So the earliest we could have it would be July
One,
2nd, right?
2.
July 2nd. Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
And
9,
that's
10. Oh, you have to have 10 in between?
You have to have, it can't be before the 10, it has to be posted for 10 days. before you
Okay,
have it.
all right.
Yeah.
So the second.
Yeah.
It's going into the holiday weekend.
9,
Yeah. It'd be better if we did it after, I think. the
But
holiday
Monday's a
weekend.
bank holiday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year we did it on the 6th or the 7th. I think it's the 6th. We could,
So
July
probably
6th.
July 6th.
yeah, July 6th or 7th, whatever works for you guys. The week 6th, 7th, or 8th would probably be the best.
Oh. But so just to kind of, we're still in open session.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so we don't all have to be there. Most
Right.
of the time, nothing happens. When nobody shows up and nothing happens. It just has to be posted so that if people in the community have questions,
Mhm.
they have a place to come and ask questions. It's not, like I said, it's usually not that big of a deal.
Nobody
Um,
cares.
The timing is the most important thing. So it has to be 10 days after it's published and
Yes.
14 days before the July meeting.
Yeah, but we won't be able to hit
But we
that.
won't
No.
won't meet that. We would if we did it
Is the time, if we do it the 2nd?
the second, we would.
Is it still, because when's our,
Are you
The
planning?
second.
It's actually a observed holiday. We can't really do that day.
What's our official meeting?
20th
It's
or
the 19th.
Yep. What do you need? And we can do it in the morning. I mean, we can do it a morning, afternoon, evening. We don't have to do it at night.
I don't care what time we do it. I'm
Yeah.
Colin.
And what we'll have prepared for you is we'll have the budget, we'll have some of the major additions that we have coming in for income, a lot of the big differences from last year to this, which is going to be kind of cumbersome because of all the grants and all that stuff, but we'll do the best we can.
You do it during the day. I can always.
Yeah. And it's good information. If you guys have questions at that time, Brittany will be there and, I mean, if we want to do it during the day, I am, right. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wanted to go, but you did it when I was working.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. And we can go ahead and do a Zoom as well that day. Russell's like.
Well,
"Another
I'm
one?"
just thinking this through and like, again, we've done things differently over the years and normally there was like a separate
Yeah.
one where the board was actually informed of everything. And this was just for the public, but it sounds like you're planning on combining the two.
And we did it last, I think 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year, we did like an hour before with the board and then we had a meeting after, like a public meeting after.
Mhm.
I mean, it was informational and then,
And then the public.
yeah. And we can do it however you want to do it. We'll send you as soon as we have it put together and completely done, we'll send it to you guys for review. And then, of course, the final one. So the notification that goes out in the paper and all that stuff is a very general, here's what our major income sources are, here's what our major expenses are. But then you guys will see the detailed budget. Obviously, it's way different, but same numbers, just.
Just like
Is
the,
there a reason that you push the board?
Well,
It says your regular meetings, what the law or the code says.
and I'm
Before
just
your-
wondering which is
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
important,
third Monday.
having a good hearing or being delinquent. We would be off by a day if we did it on the 6th. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So the 19th would be 13 days instead of 14 days if we did it on the 6th.
Well, if this makes you feel any better, we've already missed our initial posting day. That we had to have it to the county.
I know, everything's behind
Yeah. And it was,
because
I mean,
everything's behind.
it's not, it's our
Yeah.
fault somewhat, but there's negotiations and we didn't get our information from the state until really late. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's not
So
it's not something we're
Right.
going to do every time. It's just, it was situational this time. So, we'll do it the best we can for sure.
And just trying to think.
well, I mean, we could do our meeting to discuss it off schedule. I mean, like on the 1st or something, right? Because it's just the public hearing
That has
that
to
has to
be
be up
on
on
the
the
time
10
frame.
days.
Yeah.
So if everybody wanted to talk about it like the night of the
Yeah.
30th and we just zoomed in and chatted about it, but it's a public meeting, we can do that,
Yeah.
right? Or do you do it in executive session?
No,
No, it's
you do it
it's
open.
public.
the
It's all
discussion, right.
public.
Yep.
Yep.
So
There is
we
some
could-
individual stuff.
right, so we could just do it online, so everybody doesn't have to drive in if we want to do that. And then anybody that had questions from what you sent
Now it's
us,
talking 2 meetings.
could
You heard that, right?
dial in. Well, I mean, if we were just
Russell looks
doing,
tired today.
if we're doing a completely online Zoom and it was really just whatever board members still had questions or wanted to be in on that discussion piece, we could do that a couple days ahead of time, just Zoom in the evening or something,
Mhm.
right? And then have our public hearing
We
in
can.
line with,
We can, but
the
if we do
law.
that, we gotta have it, post it and
yeah, we
get all
have
that
to
stuff
post it,
out.
but I mean, we can
And
still
we've been
do the whole
doing
thing
YouTube a
online
lot,
because
so
what
that's
kind of
stuff that
crazy person's gonna watch that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the state requirements are posting 10 days
Or July 2nd, we could have a call in. An hour.
before the hearing and then having a
And
hearing
we
and
can have the
approval.
discussion during the hearing. I mean, it doesn't have to be a separate, that hearing can be questioned. Obviously, we have people from the outside asking, but you guys can ask those things too. We don't have to have a separate session. We
Mhm.
can just make it all one. Because you guys might ask questions.
I do it
Yeah,
all
they
in one
have.
for our fire department, but obviously it's a much smaller entity that it works.
I'm just trying to be careful of the Friday before holiday weekend.
Right. Yeah, I see
I'm
that.
trying to be mindful of that.
Yeah. You call it.
We are
Yes,
live.
we're
Yep.
still on.
We're always an
Don't
open
worry
meeting
about
when
it.
we're
Yeah.
together. Yep. My mic is on, so they
So
know
is
what
mine.
we're at least
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And not say things like
okay,
So,
pick a date.
yeah, as you
Yeah,
guys are
just pick a day,
contemplating
you
that, I
guys.
want to tell you as we go through our budget, we've added a few things and you'll see those stand out. We'll have those all listed. But one thing I wanted to bring up with Russell here is we're going to give him a stipend for what he does at all of our board meetings, coming in every time, and he
I
stays
agree.
late and sets all this up, and it's on top, it's way above and beyond,
Yeah.
because he works all day too, so
Mhm.
I want to make sure he
Thank
gets
you,
something
Russell.
out of that.
And he gives good
He
presentations.
does, yeah.
Your presentations were good tonight. I liked it.
was all good. It was all good. Good
It
stuff.
was all good.
Yeah.
When do
I
we wanna
love
do
it when
this?
you get everybody here.
Pick
I
a
do
day and
too.
I'll make it work for me. Let's just do it on the second. We need it.
I don't think there's
Okay.
anything problem doing with during a weekday. It's not, the holiday is Monday, you know, it's a work day on Friday, so.
Okay. And do it
Just do it at over noon hour.
during the lunch
Yeah,
hour.
Yeah.
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 I
And
think it'll be
then,
fine.
yeah.
If we want to start 11:30, so you guys have questions and the public meeting starts at 12, whatever. I would just have the whole thing as a public hearing.
Mhm.
And if you
Yeah.
guys have the questions, you can ask it during, yeah.
And it's going to be via Zoom,
Well,
pretty much.
We can do, we'll just meet at the district office, I guess. We can hardly do it there, can we? I may not even be in there if I didn't. They kicked us out.
That might have been wishful thinking.
Yeah, there could be that problem.
I mean, the other thing is we can do it like we do where you send, you know, the board packet out
Mhm.
and then we can email
Yeah.
Dr. Robinson or you our questions
Yeah.
directly.
That'd be
So that
great
those
too.
answers are prepared and then
Yep.
it streamlines the whole
That'd be an
process.
excellent idea.
So there's that as
As soon as we
well.
have it done, we'll send it to you guys.
Great. And then we
And-
can start
yeah.
shooting you our
Yep.
questions and then
Perfect.
you compile those
Okay.
and answer all of them. All right. So what time do you want to start this thing? 11:30?
I think noon is fine.
Noon?
11:30,
Yeah, I like
12.
noon.
So you have that
Good.
lunch hour.
Okay.
And I would prefer to go ahead and do YouTube on it as well because we have people depending on that. I think.
Yeah,
I
let's
think
do it.
if we stop doing that, Norm, it's not fair. So
Okay.
Are you making money on YouTube?
yes, that's how we're making our money to pay off the food debt. It's late. That was sarcasm. My apologies.
Okay.
I recognize.
Yes, thank you.
Budget hearing on July 2nd
Okay.
at noon.
July 2nd at noon.
Thank you.
July to noon.
And you'll send out documentation beforehand so
Yep.
we can address questions.
We'll figure out whether it's best to have that. We think just having it here would just make more sense.
So I'm gonna adjourn the meeting if there's nothing else.
Sounds good.
Okay, meeting
Not a good time
adjourned.
to ask you questions.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah. Okay.
You're welcome. Have a good night.